Chapter 3981. During the dinner, Qin Zhou and Liang Yin finalized a few matters. Before the official announcement of her debut, the packaging team proposed a plan to create hype. Qin Zhou specifically asked for Liang Yin's opinion. After all, as a newcomer and inexperienced, it would be difficult for her to raise the price when she took on scripts and activities in the future. Although Liang Yin's acting skills were good, and her acting skills were good, Qin Zhou had also roughly scanned through the scenes that she edited. Her acting skills were indeed on point, and she was very intelligent and talented. This point was really commendable. It showed that she had good qualifications, and her future potential was limitless. But in this industry, there were a lot of talented people, and there was never a lack of talent in acting. Under this premise, she had to make a name for herself before she could get attention. Only by getting attention could Liang Yin's acting skills and potential be discovered by the audience. Fame in the entertainment industry needed something to talk about. Only with something to talk about would there be exposure. In such a messy industry, exposure was what they really needed to work on. The packaging team proposed to create hype about Liang Yin and Hua Jin's relationship. At first, Qin Zhou did not agree. However, creating hype about a relationship was a tried and tested method. In the entertainment industry, there were not only contractual couples, but also contractual couples. As the name implied, they were together for benefits. On the surface, they pretended to be a loving couple, but in reality, they were having their own private affairs. The public relations team repeatedly promised that they would not create any scandals that were too outrageous. Only then did Qin Zhou relent and let the team come up with a proposal. After he read it and found that there were no problems, they would talk about the next step. Before her debut, Qin Zhou had also finalized a training schedule for Liang Yin. Dancing and singing were the two areas that she would focus on. If Liang Yin could be groomed into an all-round artist, that would be the best. In addition, her ability to react on the spot and her acting skills were also part of the training. For this, Qin Zhou specially contacted a famous academic professor to guide Liang Yin. At that time, Liang Yin found out that the professor that Qin Zhou contacted for her cost a lot of money per lesson. It was 6 figures per lesson. She was stunned. 6 figures. What kind of concept was that? It was said that the professor was Li Changde, an honorary professor of Beijing Film Academy. He had groomed 3 best actors and 2 best actresses. In the industry, he was definitely well respected. Many A-list celebrities were in awe of him. Moreover, he was also a consultant for many movies. If it weren't for Qin Zhou's face, even if it was hundreds of thousands per class, he might not have taken a fancy to Liang Yin. There were so many talented newcomers, and not everyone could catch his eye. After finalizing the itinerary, Liang Yin's life began to get busy. She began to travel between the set, the company, and the film academy. She had met Li Changde once and performed a set of scenes from the literary film Years Like Water. Li Changde was a little surprised when he saw it, but he was not very satisfied. Her acting wasn't bad, but there were a lot of details that were lacking. He thought that Liang Yin was a science student, so he was very strict with her. Seeing that she even had problems with the basic positioning, Li Changde criticized her severely. Liang Yin gritted her teeth and accepted it. She did not say anything. She was not a science student. She felt that since it was a class, it would not be bad to be strict. In the end, he was scolded badly by the end of the class. Chapter 3982. This Li Changde is too fierce. Every time they returned to the hotel, Liang Yin would start complaining. She knew that Li Changde was an excellent mentor. The stricter he was, the better it would be for her. However, Li Changde's expectations of her were too high. She had already tried her best, but he was always able to pick out the smallest mistakes in her performance. People aren't born to be good at acting. You're lucky to have such a good mentor like Li Zhangda to help you hone your acting skills. What about me? At this point, Liang Yin couldn't help but be curious. Didn't Qin Zhou hire a mentor to teach you acting? It's not like my previous manager was Qin Zhou. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to enjoy such treatment. Hua Jin paused and continued. When I first started, when I wasn't famous, my company wasn't willing to spend so much money on me. The vast majority of companies would rather spend money on plastic surgery for their artists than hire a good teacher. After all, it's fine as long as I'm good-looking. Later on, when I became famous and transferred to Huanyu, I didn't have the spare time to receive acting coaching. When Liang Yin heard this, she couldn't help but be suspicious. Have you had plastic surgery before? No, I didn't say that I have. Liang Yin felt that it was unbelievable. She couldn't help but reach out to touch his facial features. Then, she reached out and pinched Hua Jin's nose hard. It hurts. Hua Jin was in so much pain that he wanted to slap her hand away. Liang Yin tried to pinch his chin again. Yes, it was solid. It was obviously not hyaluronic acid. I really didn't have plastic surgery. Finally, this doubt was cleared up. Hua Jin's looks belonged to the category that defied the natural order. Everyone said that Hua Jin was a classic handsome man. When it came to acting in ancient costumes, Hua Jin said that he was the second best. No one would dare to say that they were the best. There was no doubt that he was the number one handsome man in ancient costumes. Therefore, there were many speculations about him. Many people suspected that he had undergone plastic surgery. Hua Jin was too lazy to answer the reporter's questions. Occasionally, he would pinch his face to express his disdain. So, your facial features are real. Liang Yin had always suspected that he had undergone plastic surgery. After all, there were often celebrities in this industry who had undergone plastic surgery. It wasn't unreasonable for her to be so suspicious. Hua Jin glanced at her. I even suspected that you had plastic surgery. What kind of world is this now? Do people suspect plastic surgery just because they're good-looking? Because that's the trend now. There are too many people who have undergone plastic surgery. That's true. However, I don't know why plastic surgery is becoming more and more popular now, but why do so many people who have plastic surgery look like monsters who came out of the abortion line? As Liang Yin spoke, she felt a little puzzled. Say, in the past, when plastic surgery was first developed, those who underwent plastic surgery were more natural and exquisite. Now that I look at it, they all have the same face. They had a snake-like face, cheeks that seemed to have been shaved by a knife, a chin that looked like a shoehorn, large eyes, and a high nose. Liang Yin didn't reject plastic surgery. Everyone had the right and freedom to become a beautiful person. However, wouldn't it be creepy if they all had the same face? Chapter 3983. Yangmi has had plastic surgery? She had thought that Yangmi was born with it, but it was true that Yangmi had indeed become invisible recently. Hua Jin nodded. Yes, most people in the industry have had plastic surgery to look better on camera. I think her lips look a little unnatural, but if you don't look closely, there's nothing wrong with them. Hua Jin began to reveal. Her lips have had surgery to make them pouty. She even had a smile at the corner of her mouth. Her dimples were also done through surgery. Liang Yin was speechless. Then she started to gossip. Has Yun Shishir had plastic surgery before? What do you think? I think she's very pretty and her facial features are very natural. It doesn't look like she's gone under the knife. Most importantly, I feel that her temperament is really good. She's a goddess. Of course. Shirshir is a natural beauty. For some reason, when Liang Yin praised Yun Shirshir, Hua Jin was especially pleased. He was even happier than when she praised himself. I've seen her in The Green Apple. Although at that time, teen films were always criticized, this movie between her and Gu Xingze is simply a classic teen film. I don't think anyone can surpass it. Hua Jin said, a good script, a good cast, good post-production, good publicity, and the audience's support. All these factors combined to make this movie a success. Her acting is more natural, and there's no feeling of pretense. It's easy to get into her role. When she cries, I can even feel her real heartache. Just like Yang Mi's crying scene, it feels like she's moaning for no reason. There were many scenes where I felt that she couldn't cry and just squeezed out a few tears to appease the audience. Ha ha ha. Hua Jin couldn't stop laughing. Actually, I don't hate Yang Mi, but I don't like her either. But, as you said, I still have to prove her innocence. What? In the past, Yang Mi's acting skills were very good. After all, she was an acting student and was also Su Ke's favorite student. When she first debuted, her acting skills were still very good. Later on, perhaps because there were too many fillers on her face, her expression became more stiff. Moreover, her MAC is filled with hyaluronic acid. Her crying and laughing are not very natural and look fake. It's not because of her acting skills. If that's the case, then I've wronged her. She sighed. The female celebrities from the previous generation are the ones who are truly peerless. That's the filter of that era. It's blurry and hazy, and the facial lines aren't very deep. If we were to use high-definition cameras to take pictures, the pimples and acne would all be exposed. As he spoke, Hua Jin continued, however, I pay more attention to temperament. I think that in terms of temperament, no one can compare to our Shirshir. Good, good. Your Shirshir is the most beautiful and has the best temperament. That's the truth. The two of them chatted in the room and even finished memorizing the script. Perhaps it was too boring. The two of them started gossiping and only went to bed when it was very late. Li Zhangda's class was held once a week. Qin Zhou obviously spent a lot of money on Liang Yin. One class cost 100,000 yuan. It was said that Qin Zhou was a big shot and gave her a friendly discount. Chapter 3984. Initially, Li Zhangda was moved by Qin Zhou's sincerity. Later on, he really felt that Liang Yin was a good seedling, so he taught her seriously. During the 5th period, Liang Yin thought that she would have to spend another period in Li Zhangda's bubble. She did not expect Li Zhangda to praise her for the first time. You acted well. Li Zhangda gave such a comment. When Liang Yin heard it, she was instantly overjoyed. Don't underestimate these words. Coming from Li Zhangda's mouth, it was a huge compliment, but don't be too smug. Li Zhangda muttered, young people don't get complacent just because of a little praise. Keep your cool and think about the details. It's rare for you to praise me. Can't you let me be happy for a while? Liang Yin said coquettishly. After a few classes, she left a good impression in front of Li Zhangda. Li Zhangda also gradually liked this humble student. She did not hold back and gave everything she had. The profession of acting is actually derived from dramas. In the past, when there were no dramas or movies, a stage was set up. A few people dressed in clothes would sing and dance on it, and the audience would be entertained. Later on, the film industry in China started to develop. The first drama, A Mouthful of Vegetable Pancakes, was filmed, and there was such a beginning. After a pause, Li Zhangda continued, life is like a play, and a play is like life. A truly good actor can act out all kinds of situations in the world, whatever he or she acts. He or she can act out. Aside from some people having talent, most of them have to learn. Look, in the past, there was an artist who, in order to draw a good character, sat on a chair on the street, and observed the expressions of everyone passing by. Only then could he draw out the spirit of the character. First of all, you have to know what you are acting as and what you look like. For example, if you are acting as a police officer, you have to portray that righteousness. Carefully analyze the character's personality and expression. Through daily observation, life experience is also an important part. Otherwise, why would some people go to a mental hospital to experience mental illness for a few weeks? Li Zhangde continued. Also, the most important thing is that you have to understand the script, carefully understand the character's psychology, and be immersed in the character. To be an actor, one must first get into character. Otherwise, it would be impossible to expect the audience to get into character. Also, you're still lacking in the basics of your lines. You should practice more. You should know that none of my students use post-production dubbing. It's only in China that we have dubbing actors. In the past, the foreign dubbing actors were all actors. When they dubbed for animations and foreign translated films, they would read their own lines. In China, look at the youngsters nowadays. Some of them can't even speak Mandarin well and come to act. What a disgrace. It was obvious that Mr. Li was dissatisfied with the current entertainment industry. After listening to his complaints, Liang Yin ended the class for the day. Qin Zhou happened to be free, so he took her back to the hotel. Along the way, Liang Yin was very happy. She boasted to Qin Zhou, "Today, the teacher performed for me. He said that I've improved a lot." Qin Zhou laughed. "That's a good thing." "That's right. You don't know how difficult it is to get him to perform alone." As Liang Yin spoke, she probed, "Say, this class costs 100,000 yuan. Are you going to pay for it?" "The company will pay." Chapter 3985. The company will pay for it. Then, Liang Yin was a little worried. What if I can't earn it back? Qin Zhou smiled. The artists I take care of only earn too much. There's no such thing as not earning enough money. Usually, packaging a newcomer from debut to fame will cost at least a few million. This is nothing. You don't have to worry about it. Liang Yin swore, "I will act well and not let you down. The most important thing is not to let yourself down." Okay. A week after signing the contract, the signing fee was transferred to Liang Yin's account on time. Early in the morning, Liang Yin had just woken up when she heard a ding from her phone. She picked up her phone and saw that there was a message showing that money had been transferred to her account. She opened it to take a look and was so shocked that she sucked in a breath of cold air. So much money. She had thought that 1 million was already a sky-high price. She did not expect Qin Zhou to be so generous. Just the signing fee alone was 5 million. 5 million for a newcomer. What kind of concept was that? Hua Jin's signing fee was only 100,000. It was obvious that he had good potential and could be packaged into a money tree in the future. It was impossible for a normal newcomer to sign a contract with a company like Huanyu. Even if they were to sign a contract, most of them would be supported by rich people. Moreover, Huanyu would be given a considerable amount of packaging fee to package the artist. Liang Yin was the only one who had made her debut with nothing and even received a signing fee of 5 million yuan. Liang Yin was so shocked that she was dumbstruck. She called Hua Jin. Holding her phone, she said in surprise, "Hua Jin, I'm rich." 5 million. When Hua Jin found out that she had received a signing fee of 5 million, he was envious and jealous. He said angrily, "How can a newcomer like you get a signing fee of more than 5 million? Ah, jealousy makes people ugly." Liang Yin smiled and said, "Are you envious? But it's really strange. Did Qin Zhou open the back door?" "Why do you say that?" "Because Qin Zhou said incredulously, When Gu Xing's signed with Huan Yu, he only got 10 million. You're equivalent to half of his. But at that time, he had just debuted. In that era, 10 million was far more valuable than 10 million now, right? That's true. After a pause, Hua Jin continued. However, in the current market, there are almost no newcomers who can get this amount of signing money. He said suspiciously, could it be that Qin Zhou has an unspoken rule? Don't talk nonsense. Liang Yin snorted. Are you jealous? Could it be that Qin Zhou is interested in you? Liang Yin blushed. How is that possible? Why not? Then I really can't figure out why Qin Zhou would give you so much for signing the contract. All right, don't dwell on this issue. I don't care. Everyone who saw it has a share. Give me 2 million. No. Stingy. Hua Jin said eloquently, if I didn't bring you into this industry, would you have so much money? How does it feel to become a nouveau riche overnight? Liang Yin held her phone like it was a treasure. It feels like I've become a nouveau riche overnight. When you debut, you'll earn even more. Chapter 3986. Who would want to have a feast like yours? Hua Jin paused for a moment and immediately smiled. Unless it's a year-long feast, then it would be reasonable. Liang Yin immediately cried out in grievance. Are you a vampire? A year-long feast? Based on your appetite, it's going to be Michelin every day. How can I survive? I don't care. 1 month. Half a year. 2 months. Half a year. 3 months. Hua Jin raised his eyebrows and slammed the table. All right, deal. Liang Yin was stunned. He wasn't going to call her that. She had been tricked, but since she had said it, she had to do it. The next day, Liang Yin immediately made an appointment with Hua Jin and Qin Zhou at a restaurant. She planned to treat them to a feast as a celebration. As soon as he heard that Liang Yin had invited Qin Zhou, Hua Jin immediately felt that there was an ulterior motive. Could it be that this guy wanted to use their relationship to get closer to Qin Zhou? Hua Jin's scenes ended early, but Liang Yin's scenes were delayed by the director until very late. This was a small misunderstanding. It turned out that Hua Jin wanted to have an early dinner, so he told the director in advance that he had something to do in the evening and hoped that he could finish his scenes early. In the film crew, this was a privilege that he had. Recently, the director had been quite satisfied with Hua Jin's performance. In addition, he was in a good mood recently and was pleased with his success, so he agreed readily. Who would have thought the director had scheduled his scenes to be filmed first, but in the end, the scenes of the other supporting roles were delayed. In the end, Liang Yin's scene with the female lead was scheduled for last. By the time they finished filming, it was already past 5 p.m. If Hua Jin hadn't made a call to the restaurant, they wouldn't have been able to keep their reserved seats. In the end, there were even later scenes. Qin Zhou said that he would be late for a company meeting. In the end, they had to wait for an hour. Liang Yin and Hua Jin sat in the dining room and looked around. Seeing that Qin Zhou hadn't come yet, they were a little disappointed. When exactly is he coming? Liang Yin asked Hua Jin curiously. Is he always this busy? Yes. Hua Jin nodded and said, after all, Qin Zhou is one of Huan Yu's higher-ups. He's in charge of Huan Yu's affairs, so he must be very busy. I see. Liang Yin lowered her head. At this moment, Hua Jin happened to look past her and saw the woman who walked into the restaurant and slowly walked towards the booth. Isn't this Li Jing? Li Jing? Liang Yin furrowed her brows. That name sounds familiar. I think I've heard it somewhere before. Are you stupid? Hua Jin reminded her. This is the Li Jing who was sent flying by the director before you joined the cast. She was the one who was supposed to play the role of Ubisoft. I remember now. Is she the woman you mentioned before who got pregnant and had an abortion, which delayed the filming process. Yes. Liang Yin felt inexplicably guilty and didn't dare to look back. Where did she go? Did she see me? Why are you so guilty? I don't know. It feels weird. She's coming over. As soon as Hua Jin said this, Liang Yin was like an ostrich, lowering her head even more guiltily. Hua Jin was even more depressed. Chapter 3987. Oh, so it's Hua Jin. Even though Hua Jin disliked her, he still smiled politely. Hello. Why are you here? Are you having your meal here too? As Li Jing said this, she turned around and glanced at Liang Yin. Her expression changed. She felt that this woman, who had her head lowered, was strangely familiar, but she couldn't recall her name. After a long while, she suddenly got a shock and her brows furrowed even deeper. It was her. Some time ago, one of the crew members she got to know had sent her a photo that was secretly taken of Liang Yin on the set. One was the side of her face. The other was the front. Even though it was a little blurry, Liang Yin's facial features were still recognizable. Hence, Li Jing recognized at one glance that the woman sitting in front of her was Liang Yin. It's you, Liang Yin. Li Jing immediately curled the corners of her mouth, smiled, and greeted him generously. Seeing that she couldn't hide any more, Liang Yin could only brace herself and raise her head. She forced a smile and said, Hello, Senior Li Jing. Ha ha ha. I don't think you should call me senior. Li Jing didn't know why, but she felt that the stiff smile on Liang Yin's face was extremely dazzling. It was a little forced, like a smile that wasn't a smile. She even felt that Liang Yin's smile had a hint of malice and mockery. Could it be that she was looking down on her? Or, originally, Li Jing had some groundless guesses about Liang Yin's role as the female lead. However, when she saw Liang Yin's smile and the way she deliberately avoided it, she felt that it was extremely strange. You, just the two of you? Hua Jin immediately said. We even invited Qin Zhou, but he'll be a little late. We're waiting for him. So it's President Qin. But, Hua Jin, why did you bring Liang Yin along when you're having a meal with your manager? Hua Jin immediately said, Liang Yin is also an artist under Qin Zhou. What is it? Li Jing immediately looked surprised. Didn't Qin Zhou already say that he won't be personally leading people? Why did you sign another artist now? Hua Jin immediately turned lukewarm. I'm not qualified to ask about CEO Qin's matters. Hearing this, Li Jing also felt awkward. She casually said something and smiled at Liang Yin. Aya, you're so lucky to be with President Qin. With that, he immediately left with his tail between his legs. Hua Jin had said that to protect Liang Yin. On one hand, he was reminding Li Jing that Liang Yin was Qin Zhou's woman and she shouldn't be disrespectful. On the other hand, he was telling her that they didn't welcome her. Li Jing looked very embarrassed. Liang Yin watched Li Jing's departing figure with lingering fear in her heart. She did not say anything. The way Li Jing glared at her just now was so scary. Although he was smiling, the look in his eyes was as if he wanted to cut off a piece of her flesh. It was too terrifying. After Li Jing sat down at a table by the window, she didn't feel good about it. Meeting Liang Yin in this restaurant was totally unexpected. However, when she saw Liang Yin, she felt a sense of humiliation. She had always suspected that her role had been snatched by someone else. She didn't believe that the director would fire her over such a small matter. Someone must have done something behind the scenes. Hence, she started to suspect Liang Yin. She suspected that this unknown newcomer had stolen her role. Chapter 3988. The most important thing wasn't how good the show was. It was because Hua Jin was the main lead, and one of the investors was Huan Yu. This meant that from the moment the show was broadcast, it would definitely be on the hit list. Moreover, Huanya would spare no expense in promoting the show. This meant that the show would have more exposure and popularity. What she lacked the most was popularity and popularity. What she lacked the most was popularity and popularity. If she could borrow Hua Jin's popularity and gain some popularity, then it would be self-evident that it would be beneficial to her. The role of Gu Bunyo wasn't very important in the show, but she was definitely an important character. Moreover, she had a good personality and would definitely attract a lot of fans. She was counting on this role to take her career to the next level. She hadn't expected that she would have almost completed all the scenes for the role of Gu Bunyo, but in the end, the director had actually fired her. Moreover, all her scenes had been edited out, and a new actress had been chosen. This new actress was Liang Yin. How could she not hate her? Li Jing sat in the booth. From her angle, she could see Liang Yin's face. She saw Liang Yin and Hua Jin sitting opposite each other on their phones, as if they were very familiar with Hua Jin. If it had been anyone else sitting in front of Hua Jin, they would have been nervous and at a loss. Just like her. With her status, she didn't have the right to sit at the same table as Hua Jin. Even if she did, she would be trembling with fear, afraid that she would make the slightest mistake and offend Hua Jin. On the other hand, Liang Yin acted as if she and Hua Jin were friends. Li Jing was even more suspicious of her relationship with Qin Zhou. Could it be that Liang Yin and Qin Zhou were very close, so Hua Jin also saw her as a close friend? After all, Qin Zhou was his superior. In that case, one couldn't help but wonder what methods Liang Yin had used to get to the top. Li Jing had been secretly observing them. She saw Hua Jin look at the time and suddenly call the waiter over. After a few words, the waiter started to serve the dishes one after another. It seemed that he didn't intend to wait any longer. The two of them chatted as they ate. Liang Yin looked out of the window from time to time, as if she was waiting for Qin Zhou. Not long after, Li Jing saw Liang Yin stand up and walk towards the bathroom. She also stood up and followed her into the bathroom. Liang Yin walked out of the bathroom. Just as she walked to the sink, she bumped into Li Jing. She was shocked and immediately reacted. The corners of her mouth stiffly twitched. "Senior Li Jing, why are you here?" "Speak." Li Jing opened her mouth without warning, but her tone was like a judge. "How did you get the role of Ubisoft?" Liang Yin's heart trembled. She said honestly, Hua Jin told me that the role of Abuki is being reselected. He was the one who helped me get the chance to audition. Humph, Li Jing didn't go straight to the point either. Instead, she beat around the bush and said sarcastically, "I was wondering why the director sent me away for no reason. So it's because of you. You stole the role." Liang Yin was a little surprised when she heard this. It sounded as if Li Jing was suspecting that she was the one who had secretly snatched the role. Liang Yin felt that she had been misunderstood and felt a little wronged. Chapter 3989. But the problem was, didn't the director fire her out of anger because she had messed around in the production team and got pregnant and had to go for an abortion, causing many actors in the production team to wait for days in vain? Hua Jin was the one who told her about this. So it should be quite credible. Why did she push all the blame onto her just by opening and closing her mouth? Liang Yin smiled and immediately said, "Senior Li Jing, you're wrong. I didn't steal your role. What right do I have to steal it from you? I didn't use any underhanded means to get this role. A clean conscience is not afraid of a crooked shadow. I definitely didn't use any underhanded means to steal your role." With that, Liang Yin was about to leave. However, Li Jing blocked her footsteps with her body. A clean conscience is not afraid of a crooked shadow. What a clean conscience is not afraid of a crooked shadow. Then shouldn't you explain why Huan Yu's top manager, Qin Zhou, no longer manages artists and retired behind the scenes? Why did he make a comeback and manage an unknown newcomer like you? At that time, her attitude was still very polite. If this Liang Yin was related to Qin Zhou, she would have a way to back off. Liang Yin pursed her lips and said, "My relationship with CEO Qin isn't what you think. I don't know why he signed me, but it's my honor that he's willing to manage me. Also, CEO Qin is a very nice person. Please respect him and don't speculate about our relationship." Moreover, what was the relationship between her and Qin Zhou? Why should she report it to her? Both of you, Li Jing said coldly. Did something happen? You don't have to hide it. Since we're both in this industry, don't think that you can hide your dirty tricks from others. To put it nicely, it's just a fig leaf. Who doesn't know how you got to where you are? But who asked you to have such a pretty face? Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to seduce Qin Zhou. But I'm really envious of you. What kind of man is Qin Zhou? He's so high and powerful. It's your fortune to be able to seduce him. Liang Yin was stunned. She didn't expect Li Jing to speculate about her relationship with Qin Zhou so maliciously. When it came to Qin Zhou, she immediately became serious. Please show some respect. She was extremely protective of Qin Zhou. She didn't want Qin Zhou to be judged as such an ugly person because of her. What? Li Jing smiled. Don't think that I don't know what kind of person Qin Zhou is. When he signed Yun Shirshir, I heard that Yun Shirshir had done a lot of dirty things in order to get to the top. What a pity for Mu Yaja of Xingyu Financial Group. Such a grand wedding was given to such a filthy woman. He must have been cuckolded by a thick stack. Pah! Liang Yin didn't even think before throwing a slap at her. She said angrily, "You're not allowed to criticize Yun Shirshir like that." She had only interacted with Yun Shirshir a few times, but she had left a very good impression in her heart. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was a goddess. She had also seen the real Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir. It seemed that they were a very loving couple. She absolutely didn't believe that Yun Shirshir was the unscrupulous and promiscuous woman that Li Jing said. Li Jing's blasphemy finally made her explode. Chapter 3990. During the trip to the hot spring, Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja had taken good care of her. Liang Yin also knew what kind of person Yun Shirshir was. She was Mu Yaja's wife, the wife of the CEO of the Xingyu Corporation and the goddess of the entertainment industry. Her status was so high that no one could shake it. Li Jing's blasphemy finally made her explode. She was gauging the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure. No one would believe that Yun Shirshir would ignore Mu Yaja's protection and run off to flirt with another man. It was not that Qin Zhou was not as outstanding as Mu Yaja, but Yun Shirshir did not have to do that. Moreover, Qin Zhou and Mu Yaja were close friends. With Mu Yaja's methods, there was nothing that could be hidden from him. He and Qin Zhou were so close, which only proved that there was nothing between Qin Zhou and Yun Shirshir. It was one thing for Li Jing to criticize her, but she even humiliated Qin Zhou and Yun Shirshir. This was something that Liang Yin could not stand. You're not allowed to humiliate Qin Zhou and Yun Shirshir like this. Liang Yin said angrily, "Li Jing, I respect you as my senior, so I've always been very polite to you. But don't take my respect for you as a disrespect. People care about their dignity. Do you think others don't know why you were kicked out of the production team?" Hearing this, Li Jing's face changed and turned ashen. "What do you mean by that?" Liang Yin snorted and said, "Almost everyone is spreading the news about you fooling around in the production team. There's no smoke without fire. You can't deny this, right?" Li Jing's face darkened. What nonsense are you talking about? Whether it's nonsense or not, you know it in your heart. You still need me to say it? Who did you hear this from? Liang Yin did not expose Hua Jin. She subconsciously felt that Li Jing was a rather sinister woman. She had also heard that anyone who could enter the entertainment industry definitely had some tricks up their sleeves. Therefore, she did not dare to reveal what Hua Jin had said. She only said, "It's not just one person who said that. It's spread throughout the crew. Everyone doesn't say it on the surface, but in their hearts, they all know why the director sent you flying. So, don't suspect that I'm the one who squeezed you out and stole your role. If you acted well and the director was satisfied, would he need to send you away?" Humph. Li Jing immediately calmed down and sneered, but there was obvious sarcasm. "Do you think I don't know? Was the director satisfied? My acting skills are not something a fledgling like you can compare to." Ha! Liang Yin didn't want to waste her breath arguing with this kind of person. She knew that Li Jing was mocking her. She must have followed the unspoken rules of the assistant director. She was no longer the Liang Yin of the past. She couldn't tell what was going on, but she couldn't be bothered to point it out. It wouldn't do her much good to argue with a narrow-minded person like Li Jing. So, she brought Qinzhou into the picture. "As you know, I'm an artist personally managed by Qinzhou. Just like you said, if I really relied on underhanded means to get to where I am, aren't you afraid of offending me?" And Qinzhou had previously told her, if they were to encounter any troublesome matters, then they would not hesitate to use his name to suppress the situation. In the entertainment industry, there was no situation that Qinzhou couldn't handle. Sure enough, when she heard Qinzhou's name, Li Jing did retreat. Just as Liang Yin thought, she really didn't dare to offend Qinzhou. Chapter 3991. Liang Yin didn't want to be entangled with her any longer and returned to her seat. At that moment, Qinzhou had already arrived. Liang Yin sat down slowly. When she saw Qinzhou, she put aside the unhappiness from earlier and said to him, "Why are you so late?" "You still have the cheek to talk about Qinzhou," Hua Jin complained. "Didn't you go to the washroom? Why did you take so long?" As he spoke, Hua Jin noticed from the corner of his eye that Li Jing had also returned to the seat next door with a gloomy face. He could not help but feel suspicious. Seeing that Li Jing had also returned from the direction of the restroom, he asked Liang Yin, "Was she in the restroom just now?" "Yeah, she didn't deliberately make things difficult for you, right?" Hua Jin probed with concern. Liang Yin immediately smiled. "She knows that I'm under Qinzhou, so she wouldn't dare to make things difficult for me. Humph, humph, humph. She's like a fox assuming the tigers might." Hua Jin laughed. When Qinzhou heard this, he more or less understood what was going on. Meeting Li Jing here by chance, Li Jing knew about Liang Yin. She also knew that the role of Gu Huanyao had been replaced by Liang Yin. Losing such an important role was enough for Li Jing to be depressed. It was inevitable that she would wonder what methods Liang Yin had used to get the role. Qinzhou kept this matter in his heart and planned to deal with this stumbling block later. Even though Li Jing wasn't an important role, it was necessary to show her who was the boss. Liang Yin hadn't officially debuted yet. This thorn in her side definitely couldn't be left alive. "Let's eat," Qinzhou said. Liang Yin and Hua Jin looked at each other and started eating. As Qinzhou ate, he asked, "The day after tomorrow is the little princess's birthday. Have you thought of a gift?" Hua Jin slapped his forehead. "I haven't bought anything yet. I don't know what to buy. Soon, Yueyao would turn 3. This child's gift was the hardest to think of. Giving her jewelry would be too tacky. After all, the other party was a 3-year-old child. The gold and silver jewelry were all given by the older generation. Children would definitely like children's items, but this was the most difficult thing to imagine. Building blocks? The Mu family's children's room was filled with the most popular toys. Yueyao's second brother was the chairman of Lushi Holdings. It could be said that all of Yueyao's childhood toys had been bought by Yu. He couldn't give her the toy. Then Hua Jin probed Qinzhou. What do you plan to give her? I've already ordered a BJD doll a year in advance. It's made according to Yueyao's appearance. It's a private custom-made one. Hua Jin was speechless. That should be very expensive, right? It's not expensive. It's only $300,000. How could this be called not expensive? Hua Jin's lips twitched. This Qinzhou was too cunning. He had actually started planning this year's birthday gift a year in advance. This time, Hua Jin was very troubled. He didn't know what to give her. Liang Yin, who was standing beside him, was even more confused. A few $100,000 was not expensive. Poverty had limited her imagination. Hua Jin said, Liang Yin, let me ask you something. What? What gift did you wish to receive when you were young? When Liang Yin heard this, she looked a little uncomfortable. I didn't celebrate my birthday when I was young. Why? Because Liang Yin laughed dryly. No one remembers my birthday. After a while, I felt that birthdays were not necessary. Chapter 3992. She had grown up in a broken family and had never had a complete family, let alone a complete birthday. It was as if her birth wasn't worth celebrating. Hua Jin saw the loneliness on her face and thought that he had touched her sore spot. He said awkwardly, Sorry. Why are you apologizing? Liang Yin hurriedly explained, Actually, I don't think it's a big deal. I don't really care about birthdays, but if it were me when I was young, she thought for a while, and said slowly, No matter what the present is, as long as it's a birthday present, I will like it very much. Really? Yeah, actually, it doesn't matter what the present is. What's important is the thought behind it. When you open the present, nothing can compare to the feeling of anticipation. It doesn't matter if it's expensive or not. What's important is the feeling of anticipation and surprise. Qinzhou looked deeply at Liang Yin, but didn't say anything. Instead, he pretended to ask casually, When is your birthday? I don't seem to remember. I don't really celebrate my birthday. Hua Jin asked Qinzhou, Qinzhou, help me think. What should I choose for Yueyao's birthday? Think about it yourself. Qinzhou snorted. Don't you think it's a little late to be thinking about a birthday present now? If you had prepared it earlier, you wouldn't have been so flustered. Hua Jin ignored him and said to Liang Yin, Accompany me to the mall tomorrow. Qinzhou immediately interrupted Hua Jin. She has class tomorrow. If you want to go, you can go by yourself. Hua Jin's face was full of resentment. Seeing Hua Jin's regretful face, Liang Yin couldn't help but laugh. How about this? I'm free tomorrow night, so I can accompany you to the mall. Great. Hooray. Hua Jin gave Qinzhou a look as if he was showing off. Liang Yin smiled, but the corners of her lips suddenly froze. She didn't know why, but she was inexplicably envious of Yueyao. There was even an element of jealousy. Of course, her jealousy wasn't malicious. She was simply envious that Yueyao was able to grow up in such a beautiful environment. Her mother doted on her, and her father doted on her. Everyone in the family treated her like a precious pearl. People were born different from each other. At night, when Qinzhou returned home, he passed by the study. He suddenly thought of something and walked into the study. There was a stack of documents on the desk. He casually picked it up and pulled out a few pages. He flipped to one of the pages. It was information about Liang Yin. On it was Liang Yin's ID number. With the ID number, Qinzhou obtained her date of birth. Generally speaking, the birth date on the identity certificate was usually the Gregorian calendar. Then, in terms of the lunar calendar, at the beginning of the next month, Qin smiled, closed the file, and left the study. Hua Jin pestered Liang Yin to go to the mall, to buy a gift. In the end, under Liang Yin's guidance, they finally chose a princess dress. Liang Yin liked it very much. Hua Jin didn't know how to choose a birthday gift for a girl. But when he saw that Liang Yin had chosen a dress that was suitable and beautiful, he bought it for 20,000 yuan. Chapter 3993. It happened to be the weekend on Yueyao's birthday. Hua Jin originally wanted to bring Yueyao along, but Yueyao had to stay with the crew to catch up on the progress. Therefore, she asked Hua Jin to bring the gift she had prepared for her. Hua Jin did not expect Liang Yin to be so thoughtful as to secretly prepare a gift. He did not know what she had prepared. Along the way, his curiosity was about to explode. He stared at the gift box anxiously, but in the end, he restrained himself. When Hua Jin arrived at the Mu family's house with Liang Yin's gift, he realized that the gifts from relatives and friends were piled up on the floor of the living room. Yun Shishir sat on the floor with Yueyao in her arms, encouraging her to open the gifts. On the side, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen provided assistance. After all, it was really tiring to open so many gifts. All the guests stood at the side with smiles on their faces, watching Yueyao open the gifts. Everyone wanted to see if Yueyao liked the gifts they had given her. Most of the guests were close to the Mu family. Some were senior executives of Xingyu Financial Group, and some were personal friends of Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir. Hua Jin glanced casually and saw a key lying quietly in a diamond-studded gift box at the side. This key was quite retro. It had a hollow rose pattern, like the style of a medieval European palace. He asked Yun Shishir curiously, "Who gave you this key?" Yun Shishir looked up and smiled, helplessly. "Xiao Jia gave it to me." "He gave you a key?" Hua Jin was a little suspicious. He picked up the key, but could not figure out what it was. He did not know what the purpose of this key was. Yun Shishir said helplessly, "It's the key to a castle." Hua Jin was speechless. Gong Jia gave Yueyao a castle? Had he always been so generous? The castle. I heard that it also comes with an island. Hua Jin mumbled, "What a big deal." Little Jia said that he only has one niece, so of course he has to give everything he has. However, I also joked that if he gave Yueyao a castle and an island every year for her birthday, he would probably go bankrupt before Yueyao reached adulthood. Yu Yu looked up and revealed a sinister smile on her exquisite face. "When it's my birthday, he'll give me a castle too. That'll be interesting." As far as he knew, Gong Jia owned 4 castles, 6 islands, and 3 private jets. Xiao Yichen had always been thinking about the super luxury yacht under Gong Jia's name. He planned to ask him for it on his birthday. Hua Jin carefully put the key, which was worth tens of millions of dollars, aside and rubbed his hands. At the same time, he passed the birthday gifts that he and Liang Yin had prepared for Yun Shishir. "Here, this is the birthday gift I prepared for Yueyao." Yun Shishir took it and realized that there were 2 gifts. "Why did you give me 2? One is for Liang Yin." Liang Yin. Ah, Yun Shishir suddenly remembered. "Is she the girl who was with you on that vacation?" "Yeah. By the way, the gift is here. Why don't I see her?" Chapter 3994. Hua Jin said, "She's been busy recently and didn't have time to come, so she asked me to send the gift over. She said that she wanted to thank you for your hospitality and care last time. Also, she asked me to wish Yueyao a happy birthday." As he spoke, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Did humans really have a sixth sense? At least, he felt that they did, because he really did feel that a terrifying demon king was standing behind him. Hua Jin turned around in horror, only to see Gong Jie standing behind him, looking down at him. Gulp! The sound of him swallowing his saliva. Yun Shishir looked at Hua Jin, and then at Gong Jie, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She didn't know why, but whenever the two of them met, there would always be a tense confrontation. They couldn't get along well at all. Yun Shishir helplessly tugged at Gong Jie's sleeve and asked hesitantly, Why are you staring at Hua Jin like that? It's as if you want to swallow him alive." Gong Jie turned around. When he faced Yun Shishir, he immediately smiled gently. "Why would I, sister?" When he faced Yun Shishir, his smile was as gentle as it was gentle. Hua Jin quickly diverted his attention. He squatted in front of Yueyao and clapped his hands to attract her attention. "Uncle Hua Jin will open the present with you, okay?" Yueyao shook her head and said in a childish voice, "I can't open it anymore. I want to play with this." The little fellow was only 3 years old. She still had a childish voice. If one had to describe her, it would be like a kitten that had just been weaned off milk, squeaking and squeaking. She had just grown a new row of teeth, and when she smiled, it was as if she was encrusted with a beautiful shell. Because it was her birthday, Yun Shishir helped Yueyao change into a beautiful princess dress. The fluffy skirt wrapped around her fair and tender legs, and she wore a crown of the Ice Snow Princess series on her head. Anyone who saw her couldn't help but want to hug her. However, not everyone could hug this noble little princess. With Yu and Xiao Yichen around, and Mu Yaja, Yueyao's little feet usually didn't even have a chance to touch the ground. Yun Shishir always said that even if she was a girl, she should not be so spoiled, lest she developed princess syndrome. In the end, what did Mu Yaja say? "My Mu Yaja's daughter is a princess syndrome." It was rare for Gong Jie to speak up from his brother-in-law's perspective. Our Yueyao was born a little princess. What's wrong with being delicate like a princess? Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she also felt a little worried. With Mu Yaja and Gong Jie, the two of them doted on Yueyao so much. In addition, there were two older brothers. However, the most amusing thing was that Yun Shishir didn't really spoil Yueyao, but Yueyao was the closest to her. Mu Yaja was also very surprised. Once, he specially asked Yueyao about everyone's ranking in her heart. Yueyao's ranking was like this. Yun Shishir was the most senior. Then, in order, Mu Yaja, Yu, Gong Jie, Xiao Yichen, Hua Jin, Gong Jie felt especially wronged. He doted on Yueyao as much as Mu Yaja, so why was his ranking so low? Chapter 3995. Yun Shishir accompanied Yueyao the most. Even though she was a little strict with Yueyao at times and played the role of the bad cop the most, Yueyao was still the closest to her, which made many people jealous. Hua Jin immediately said, "Then Uncle will take you to the yard to play, okay?" Yueyao immediately opened his little arms when he heard this. Many of the guests had brought their own children, and they were all playing in the yard. Yueyao was tired of opening the gifts and gradually lost interest. Hence, he wanted to go to the yard to play. Hua Jin was about to carry him when Gong Jie squatted down and teased Yueyao. "Uncle will carry you, okay?" Yueyao looked at Hua Jin, then at Gong Jie. Suddenly, he threw himself into Hua Jin's arms. Gong Jie was speechless. He was completely stunned. Yueyao actually didn't choose him. Didn't they say that his ranking was higher than Hua Jin's? How did this little girl change her attitude so quickly? Yun Shishir laughed heartily. She leaned close to Gong Jie's ear and whispered, "Some time ago, Hua Jin bought Yueyao her favorite doll from the Frozen series." Gong Jie's face darkened even more. Weren't they just two dolls? What was so great about that? Hua Jin felt a sense of accomplishment when he saw Yueyao throwing herself at him. He felt comforted, but at the same time, he felt a little worried. As petty as Gong Jia, he wouldn't hold a grudge, right? Forget it. Anyway, he had always been at odds with Gong Jia. It wasn't a big deal to hold a grudge against him. Hua Jin carried Yueao and walked into the yard. Yun Shishir had decorated the yard into a small garden. The flower bed was filled with Chinese roses, a swing, a seesaw, and a musical fountain. The yard was very big. Because it was a garden villa, the yard alone occupied more than 1,000 square meters. The children were playing hide and seek. Yueao also wanted to join in. However, Hua Jin was afraid of playing hide and seek. It was inevitable that he would have to hide and walk. If he accidentally fell and left a faint scar on the little princess's flawless body, Mu Yaja and Gong Jia would definitely have the urge to chop him up. Hence, he was easy to coax. Fortunately, Yueao was easy to coax and let her obediently sit on the swing and let Hua gently push her from behind. Standing at the balcony entrance, Yun Shishir looked on with gratification. Turning her head, she saw Gong Jia staring at the swing, too. Her lips curled into a smile. Have you been busy recently? I went back to the Gong residence a while ago. Gong Jia paused for a moment before replying nonchalantly, he wants to meet you. The smile on Yun Shishir's lips froze when she heard that. Him. She didn't need to ask to know that him was probably referring to Gong Xiaoying. It was too sudden. She didn't expect Gong Xiaoying to take the initiative to ask to see her. Isn't he no longer in the Gong residence? He's back. Gong Jia continued. Of course, if you don't want to see him, I won't reply to him. Okay. Yun Shishir's tone suddenly turned cold. I wanted to see him too. This is the first and last time we're meeting as father and daughter. Rather than a meeting, it was more appropriate to call it a negotiation. It was time to put an end to the past grudges. She didn't want such a man to appear in her life again. It was about time to end everything once and for all. Chapter 3996. Gong Jia smiled and said, Sure. Initially, he did not want to mention this at the birthday party, as he was afraid that she would be upset. However, from what he knew, Yun Shishir would not be upset because of this. She was also looking forward to meeting Gong Xiaoying. After so long, Yun Shishir also understood that perhaps Gong Xiaoying did not have any ill intentions towards her, and it was just that he had used the wrong method to satisfy his greed. And his greed was just like what Gong Jia had said. He was just an old father who wanted to reunite with his family. However, he could not shirk his responsibility for erasing Yu's memory, which indirectly led to the destruction of Yu's first personality. She could not forgive him. She felt that Gong Xiaoying had betrayed her mother once, and she had no right to comment on that. That was a grudge between the previous generation. However, imprisoning Yu and turning him into a tool for his own benefit was a second betrayal. A betrayal to her. Gong Xiaoying blamed her for being so resolute, and she also hated him for being so heartless. Gong Jia had not expected that Yun Shishir would be willing to meet Gong Xiaoying. From her expression, it was as if she was talking about the past with an old friend. He could not even see any resentment in her eyes. Instead, it was a kind of calmness that did not care. He had not expected that she would be willing to meet Gong Xiaoying. Perhaps Gong Xiaoying was afraid. He was afraid that meeting her would break all ties. Hence, Gong Xiaoying had been avoiding Gong Jia. He was afraid that Yun Shishir would take the initiative to meet him. Hence, like a coward, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Yun Shishir thought that he had disappeared and would not appear in her world. She did not expect that Gong Xiaoying would suddenly ask to see her, as if they had a tacit understanding. The father and daughter both vaguely understood that this meeting might mean a break between the two of them. However, she still had to see him. Behind them, Yu could vaguely hear their conversation. However, the moment Yun Shishir and Gong Jia turned around, she immediately hid in a dark corner. It was not until Gong Jia and Yun Shishir were far away that he walked out from the corner in a daze. He vaguely heard his mother say that she wanted to meet that man. He was a little worried. The day after the birthday party, Gong Xiaoying found out that Yun Shishir was willing to meet him, so he put aside all his work and asked Gong Jia to arrange a meeting between him and Yun Shishir. Not long after, Gong Xiaoying flew to the capital. They arranged to meet at a secluded villa of Gong Jia in the capital at 6 o'clock in the evening. Yun Shishir would show up as promised. For the entire night, Gong Xiaoying could not sleep peacefully. He repeatedly pondered in his heart about how he should tell his daughter that he had not seen her for so many years and how he missed her and felt guilty for her. He was not very good at saying sentimental things, but it was obvious that this might be the last chance for the two of them to meet again. The second time they met might be at his funeral. Thus, he wanted to seize the opportunity to organize what he wanted to say to the Fate Society. However, the more he thought about it, the more confused his thoughts became. In the morning, Gong Jia called to say that he would be accompanying Yueyao in the evening, so the meeting time was set at noon. After lunch, she would come. Gong Xiaoying acted as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He deliberately styled his hair and changed into a formal suit, looking especially formal. Chapter 3997. Yun Shishir was very punctual. In this aspect, she was very much like him. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Yun Shishir and Gong Jia arrived on time. Gong Xiaoying was sitting in the living room. His assistant received the news and rushed to the door. Soon, he walked to his side and whispered in his ear, "They're here." When he heard this, his body inexplicably stiffened, as though he was nervous. Gong Xiaoying straightened his back and looked up. He saw Yun Shishir's slightly slender figure appear at the door. Gong Jia came with her, but he did not enter. Instead, he stood at the door, gave her a few instructions, and turned to leave. Gong Xiaoying also gave his assistant a look. "You may leave." "Yes." The assistant immediately left respectfully. Yun Shishir slowly walked through the door. Behind her, the door slowly closed. She walked to the sofa opposite Gong Xiaoying. First, she looked at him calmly. Then, she closed her legs and slowly sat down. Gong Xiaoying did not try to hide his gaze, as it landed directly on her body. The first thing that came to his mind was that Mu Qingcheng had actually given birth to such a beautiful daughter for him. She had a delicate and beautiful face, and her black hair was soft and smooth. There was no extra embellishment, but it was already charming enough. She was wearing a simple dress and a knitted jacket. It was simple, but it gave people a feeling of a cool breeze. Yun Shishir was silent. Perhaps she was waiting for him to speak first. Gong Xiaoying was also silent for a long time. Suddenly, he closed his eyes. As a father, he was the first to break the silence. "Thank you for coming to see me. I thought you didn't want to see me." When Yun Shishir heard this, there was not much expression on her face. Instead, she asked in return, "Why are you willing to see me? I thought you wanted to hide from me forever." "Indeed." Gong Xiaoying smiled self-deprecatingly. "At first, I didn't dare to see you because I felt guilty and uneasy. I was afraid that you would make a decision with me. But someone told me—" He paused and inhaled a breath of cold air. "Someone told me that if I kept hiding from you and refused to see you, I might not have the chance to see you again in this lifetime." With a sigh, Gong Xiaoying looked a little worried. "I also think it's funny. Why are we father and daughter, but we're like enemies? I won't forgive you." Yun Shishir also spoke up, but her tone was firm. I hate you. Only these 3 words. Gong Xiaoying felt as if his heart was being pierced. In fact, he hadn't expected what she would say. The only thing he had expected was that she would say these 3 words, I hate you. Even though he had expected this, he still felt his heart ache when she casually uttered those 3 words. I know that you hate me. Gong Xiaoying pursed his lips helplessly. I also know that you're here to sever our relationship as father and daughter. I know all these. Yun Shishir heard this, but she looked down coldly. Gong Xiaoying clenched the cane in his hand. This time, he had let go of all his pride and all his hatred for the Mu family. He did not want to hate anyone, and he did not have the right to. Perhaps he was a successful businessman. As a businessman, his achievements were eye-catching and unparalleled. But whether it was as a husband or a father, he was a failure. Chapter 3998. As her husband, he had made that woman wait her whole life, but he did not return. As her father, his daughter had turned against him and told him that she hated him. She even wanted to cut off their father-daughter relationship. Gong Xiaoying knew that he was guilty. However, he hoped that Yun Shishir could return to his side and reunite with him. However, he had used the wrong method. He had pinned the feud between the Gong and Mu families on Yun Shishir. The saddest thing for a person was to gradually become the person he hated the most. He used to hate the Mu family so much, but now he had become the executioner he hated the most. I'm sorry. Gong Xiaoying sighed heavily. He looked up, and in an instant, there was a lot of vicissitudes in his eyes. I know that you must hate me very much, and I won't shamelessly beg you to forgive me. However, I'm already very satisfied to be able to see you again. When Yun Shishir heard this, she did not show it on the surface, but there were waves of emotions in her heart. Grievance, resentment, confusion, and doubt. More than that, she felt sad for her mother. She tugged at the corner of her lips and gave an extremely pale smile. You know, you're sorry, but no matter how many times you say it, it's useless. You also feel guilty towards my mother, but no matter how many times you say sorry, she can't return to your side, and she can't return to my side. You've made her love you all her life, wait for you all her life, and hate you all her life. Is this something that can be redeemed with just a few words of apology? Gong Xiaoying fell into a deep silence. Yun Shishir continued. Once you've caused harm to someone, no matter how many times you apologize, it won't be able to offset the harm. She can't come back, and you can't go back either. Gong Xiaoying's eyes throbbed. He hated himself for not fighting for it, and hated himself even more for making Mu Qingcheng wait for so long in vain. Yun Shishir took a deep breath and asked, Why did you erase Yu's memory back then? I hope. Gong Xiaoying paused and explained, I hope that he can stay by my side. After all, he is the blood of the Gong family. I don't recognize the Mu family, and I don't recognize that brat Mu Yaja either. Then Yun Shishir asked coldly, Can you return Yu to me? Hasn't he already returned to your side? Yun Shishir furrowed her brows and suddenly said hoarsely, He did come back to my side, but the old Yu has completely disappeared. He's no longer here. The current Yu has become a little unfamiliar. He can't go back to how he used to be. After pausing for a few seconds, she glared at Gong Xiaoying with hatred. It's you. If it's not you, you would never become like this. Do you know how much pain he's in now? Gong Xiaoying didn't want to explain himself, but at the mention of Yu, he couldn't help but say, if I didn't bring him back to the Gong family, his condition might have deteriorated rapidly. Do you know his condition? Yun Shishir was stunned. His condition isn't optimistic. If he didn't recuperate in the Gong family, his organs might have gradually withered. Gong Xiaoying wasn't lying about this. This was also the reason why Gong Jie didn't hate Gong Xiaoying that much. Chapter 3999. And reality had proven that Gong Xiaoying's actions were indeed effective. Yu Yu's health was gradually improving. His heart's function had also increased by more than 5 times. At least, his body was no longer as weak as before. It was just that Gong Xiaoying did not tell anyone. It was fine if others misunderstood him. But Yun Shishir could not. He still had a selfish motive. He wanted to let her know his good intentions clearly, at least for this reason. Even if she did not forgive him, at least she did not want to cut off all contact with him. This was already a plea. Gong Xiaoying was such a proud man. He was high-spirited and arrogant all his life. Only in front of Yun Shishir did he lower his voice. Perhaps it was because Yun Shishir and Mu Qingcheng looked too much alike. When he saw this daughter, it was as if he could see through her soul and see the woman he once loved deeply. His heart melted into a puddle. He poured all the guilt and love he had for Mu Qingcheng into her, hoping to make up for his regrets and mistakes. Whether she appreciated it or not, he could not decide. He only hoped that even if she pitied him, she would not be so ruthless. Don't think that I'm her. Are you trying to brush me off with such words? Yun Shishir said angrily, You can't go back to how he was before. And this is all thanks to you. Gong Xiaoying, what is your heart made of? Is it cold? You caused my mother to suffer for her entire life, and you want to turn my world upside down before you are satisfied, right? Gong Xiaoying shook his head, but he could only shake his head. He could not explain anything else. Can you think of a way to make him go back to how he was before? Yun Shishir bit her lip hard and clenched her fists nervously. She was looking forward to Gong Xiaoying's other methods to wake up the old Yu. She wanted the old Yu to come back. Gong Xiaoying said calmly, He has a split personality. Do you know about this? Yun Shishir said, Now, I know. I didn't know about this before. Because he's too good at hiding. Gong Xiaoying's eyes revealed a rare look of admiration. This child has always known how to dote on others. He dotes on you and wants to protect you, so he only reports the good news and not the bad news. Is there no other way? Gong Xiaoying said, What if I say yes? Yun Shishir's originally lifeless eyes seemed to have been dyed with light all of a sudden. Her eyes widened. Really? Or we can go back to the past and have the 2 personalities live in the same body. However, this is very painful. 2 personalities coexisting is very dangerous. Sooner or later, he won't be able to bear the burden. Because his 2 personalities are opposites, they will never be able to merge or accept each other. They are destined to clash. Yun Shishir's heart ached when she heard this. The old Yu had 2 personalities coexisting. In front of her, he was innocent and obedient, kind and pure. But the other side was perhaps unimaginably cold. Did they have to go back to this? She couldn't bear to. She didn't want Yu to suffer like this. Then, didn't you say there was another way? Yun Shishir was full of hope. What is it? Gong Xiaoying raised his eyes. His once handsome face was now filled with vicissitudes. Or we can awaken the first personality and let that personality kill the second personality with his own hands so that the first personality can regain his dominant position. Chapter 4000. The corners of Gong Xiaoying's lips curved upwards. In fact, the first personality will never be killed. That's because the first personality is the original personality, while the second personality is a derivative personality. Many studies have shown that other than the first personality, all other personalities will be killed except for the first personality. Even if he disappears, he will be temporarily sealed up. The way to awaken the first personality is very simple. However, If you want the first personality to take over, unless the first personality kills the second personality, it's very difficult to do so. Yun sure felt a stab of pain in her heart. Regardless of whether it was the first personality or the second personality, they were both her Yu. Whether it was the kind Yu or the cold Yu, they were both her flesh and blood. Regardless of which personality it was, she didn't want to give up easily. The first personality killing the second personality, why did she have to make you go through such a cruel decision? No, Yun Shurshu's lips suddenly trembled violently. Is there no other way? Gong Xiaoying shook his head silently. Sure, I understand your feelings. Just like me, I also hope that you will be well. It's just that there's no way to make it perfect. You understand my feelings? When Yun Shurshu heard that, she sneered coldly. You understand? If you understand, you won't be so cruel as to kill Yu's first personality. I didn't kill it. Gong Xiaoying's tone was very calm. No matter how good I am, I can't infiltrate the child's consciousness. What I'm saying may sound a little abstract, but to put it simply, other than the second personality, no one can communicate with the first personality. Yun Shurshu's face froze as if she was frozen. I don't believe it. Her gaze was empty as she muttered. I don't believe that there's only one cruel way. There must be another way. Shurshu. Yun Shurshu suddenly stood up. You're not allowed to call me that. You have no right to call me that. Gong Xiaoying was speechless. He didn't dare to say anything else, afraid that he would accidentally say something that would anger her. She was too sensitive. He had to tread carefully. Calm down. Maybe there are other ways. Give me a little more time. I'll definitely think of something. No need. What method can you think of? The only method you can think of is the cruel method. The only method you can think of is to kill the personality cruelly. You are the executioner. In a fit of anger, Yun Shurshu spoke without thinking. Because of her words, Gong Xiaoying's heart ached so much that he almost suffocated. However, he did not say a word. He remained silent and let her vent. He understood that her emotions had accumulated to a critical point and needed to explode. He allowed her to vent her emotions. That's all for today. I hope you can respect yourself and stop interfering with my life in the future. Yun Shurshu added, no matter what, Yu is my son. No matter what, I will find the old Yu. You don't have to worry about anything else. After saying that, she left without looking back. Gong Xiaoying stood up and wanted to chase after her. However, when he saw how determined she was, he didn't have the courage to do so. He had lost. He admitted defeat. However, he had only himself to blame. Chapter 4001. Gong Xiaoying let out a heavy sigh and fell back onto the sofa. His face was expressionless. The door opened again. Gong Jie walked in and saw him sitting in the dark, looking desolate. He finally spoke. Father. Gong Xiaoying grunted. How is she? She left. I've already asked the chauffeur to send her back. Send her back. Otherwise, I won't be at ease. Then you don't have to worry about me. Gong Xiaoying waved his hand weakly. I'll just sit here alone. Gong Jie didn't say anything else. He turned around and left. The door closed again. However, Gong Xiaoying didn't notice that in the corner of the escalator on the second floor, a figure was slowly hiding in the corner. You stood in the corner expressionlessly. Earlier on, when he heard what Yun Shurshu and Gong Xiaoying said, he actually felt a little upset. Disappointment, grievance, loneliness, unwillingness, guilt. He knew that the once innocent and adorable Yu occupied an unshakable position in Yun Shurshu's heart. He also understood that even if he gave everything he had, he might not be able to replace Yu's position in Yun Shurshu's heart. However, he still wanted to try. Therefore, he occupied this body and stayed by Yun Shirshir's side only to gain recognition. He wanted to replace Yu. However, it seemed that he couldn't do it. No one could ever replace another person. Everyone was independent, and no one could replace them. But why couldn't he? Was he not good enough? Was he not as good as Yu? He was already trying hard to change. His mother liked to see him smile. Even though he wasn't used to smiling in front of others, he was trying hard to become sunny and play the role of an innocent and pure person. However, he was originally a second personality, a personality born from darkness. How could he transform into the real sunshine? This was a form of suppression in disguise. He had also thought of giving up. She wanted to give up and let the original Yu return to her body. As for him, he chose to sleep forever and never wake up. But he couldn't do it. Even if he was born from darkness, he still instinctively felt warmth in his heart. Yun Shirshir was as warm as the sun. Gradually, he developed a fatal dependence on this kind of warmth. Therefore, he occupied this body and wanted to play the role of Yu and take all of Yun Shirshir's love. However, he had also heard it. He had truly heard it. Yun Shirshir missed the old Yu so much and hoped that he would return to her side. He found out from Gong Jia that Yun Shirshir was meeting with Gong Xiaoying, so he secretly came here. He did not tell anyone because he was worried. Thus, he secretly hid on the second floor and overheard their conversation. However, when he heard Yun Shirshir's true thoughts, he couldn't help but feel a little sad. Could it be that he wasn't needed? Yu couldn't help but doubt himself. She seemed to miss the old Yu. But what about him? Didn't she need him? Couldn't he replace him? Then, what was the point of his existence? Yu clutched his heart and squatted down with a lonely expression, hugging himself helplessly. He also longed for warmth. He was also Yu. He was also a part of this life. Why was he not needed? Why was he so rejected? Chapter 4002. At the same time, something that Gong Xiaoying said reminded him of something. The first personality will never be killed. Was that really the case? Yu pondered over this sentence and felt a tinge of fear in his heart. The first personality would never be killed, but the second personality would disappear forever. He was the second personality. He could be killed by the first personality, disappear from this world forever. Yu furrowed his brows. There was a look of hesitation and conflict on his exquisite and handsome face. It was as if he had finally made up his mind. The corners of his lips curled into a cold arc. When Gong Jia and Yun Shirshir returned to the Mu residence, they didn't see Yu. They couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Xiao Yichen was taking an afternoon nap. Yun Shirshir shook him awake and asked him where Yu had gone. Xiao Yichen said, "Isn't Yu at home?" The two of them looked at each other. Yun Shirshir finally panicked. Why wasn't Yu at home? If he wasn't at home, where could he have gone? It had been more than a year since that incident. Yu had returned from Ashland Island. She still remembered that when he had just returned, he was extremely cold towards her, and Mu Yaja, Yun Shirshir's heart ached for him because he had lost all his memories. That was why he had become so cold. However, she cherished what she had lost even more now that she had regained it. She patiently accompanied him and cared for him. In the end, Yu gradually stopped being estranged from her and was no longer so cold towards her. He gradually accepted both Mu Yaja and Xiao Yichen and was willing to accept this family. At first, she was still worried that Yu would leave her secretly one night. However, even though Yu wasn't as innocent and adorable as before, he had gradually opened up to her. He had also started to like sticking to her. Yu usually wouldn't run around. Something must have happened. He had started to dote on her and wouldn't let her worry. How could such a Yu suddenly disappear without a word? Just as Yun Shirshir was extremely worried, Yu obediently returned home half an hour later. Mommy! Yun Shirshir was about to call Mu Yaja and ask him to hurry home to find Yu. Just as she picked up her cell phone, the door opened. She and Gong Jia turned their heads and stared at Yu as he slowly walked into the house. She was stunned for a moment, then immediately rushed over nervously and hugged him in her arms. Yu, where have you been? Yu couldn't help but yearn for her warm embrace. He hugged Yun Shirshir's shoulders and stroked her hair gently. I was bored at home, so I went out for a walk. His tone was extremely affectionate, but he sounded a little dazed as he spoke. He saw Yun Shirshir's nervousness, but he also felt a little lost. Was this worry real? Was this kind of warmth real? He was a little dazed. He didn't know if Yun Shirshir's worry was for him or for this body. The conversation she had with Gong, Xiaoying earlier, still rang in his ears. She had said that she was still waiting for Yu to return to her side. Yu, are you cold? Yun Shirshir's gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. It was snowing outside. Chapter 4003. Yun Shirshir's gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. It was snowing outside. She didn't know where he had gone or how far he had walked. Just thinking about it made her heart ache. Yun Shirshir touched his little hand. It was icy cold. Her heart ached as she held it and rubbed it for him. Mommy! Yu's lips curled into a smile as he turned to look at her. Yun Shirshir had never seen Yu smile so brightly and warmly. At least, she had never seen him smile so brightly since he had returned from Ashland Island. She caressed his cheek gently. What's the matter? Yu smiled and said, Mommy, if I had a wish list, would you fulfill all my wishes? Wish list? Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. You have a wish list? Yeah. Yu nodded and said, Yes, I have a lot of wishes. Mommy, are you willing to fulfill them? If Mommy can fulfill them, Mommy will definitely fulfill them. Yu's face broke into a rare smile. He pursed his lips and smiled shyly. However, he immediately regained his usual calm expression. Then you can't go back on your words. Yeah, when have I ever gone back on my words? Yun Shirshir said as she kissed his rosy cheeks. At night, Xiao Chen walked into the room and saw Yu sitting on the bed. He was holding a notebook and scribbling with a fountain pen. Yu was used to using a fountain pen. The most surprising thing was that he had never practiced writing with a fountain pen before. However, his handwriting with a fountain pen was especially delicate and beautiful. Xiao Chen didn't know what he was scribbling on. He looked over curiously. However, Yu sensitively closed the notebook and glanced at him warily. What are you doing? Looking, what are you drawing? I'm drawing you. Xiao Chen was pleasantly surprised. Really? As he spoke, he reached out to snatch the notebook from Yu's hand. However, Yu immediately dodged him. He picked up the notebook and slapped it hard on his forehead. Xiao Chen covered his forehead in pain and complained pitifully. Why did you hit me? How pretentious. Yu scoffed. Aren't you supposed to be able to take pain? Why are you groaning in pain? Xiao Chen was speechless. He crossed his arms angrily and asked angrily, You secretly drew me. Can I see how you drew it? I didn't ask you to look, so don't look. As Yu spoke, she turned around and flipped open her notepad. She held a fountain pen and started scribbling. Seeing that Xiao Chen really didn't want to show it to him, Xiao Chen didn't want to be snubbed. He lay down on the bed and played games on his phone. Yu glanced sideways and looked deeply at Xiao Chen. Then she quietly wrote on her notepad, I want to celebrate my birthday with Xiao Chen. Here. Yu handed an exquisite notebook to Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. "What's this?" "Yu Yu's wish list." Yun Shirshir couldn't help but laugh. She originally thought that he was just joking about his wish list. She didn't expect him to really come up with a wish list. She flipped to the first page. On the title page, Yu Yu had drawn a cartoon version of his family photo. His drawing skills were exquisite, and the cartoon version was very casual. Chapter 4004. On the first item of the wish list, Yu Yu wrote, "I want Mommy to give me a morning kiss every morning and a good night kiss every night before I go to bed." Yun Shirshir smiled, gently hugged the back of his neck, and gave him a kiss. "Mwah." "Good morning, Yu Yu." Yu pursed his lips and blushed. He stood on his tiptoes and kissed her gently on the cheek. "Good morning, Mommy." Yun Shirshir immediately said, "Good boy. Mommy will give you a morning kiss and a good night kiss every day until you get married." "Okay, what's the second item?" Yun Shirshir looked down the list again. The second item was, "Say I love you to Yu Yu." "Are all your wishes so simple?" Yun Shirshir muttered in her heart. This little guy was so easily contented. She hugged him and said, "Yu Yu, Mommy loves you. Mommy will always love you." When Yu Yu heard this, the corners of his mouth finally broke into a warm smile. His heart was instantly filled with warmth. He snuggled up to Yun Shirshir and rested his head on her knee. He just stayed by her side, quietly. He wanted time to stop here and never leave again. He wanted to hug her like this and never let go of her. This warm embrace was the most difficult thing for him to let go of. However, he knew. He was very clear about it. Time would not stop here, and it would not stop at this moment. Therefore, he cherished every minute and every second in front of him. His docility and dependence made Yun Shirshir feel tender affection for him. She hugged his back and slowly scanned through the wish list. 4. I want to build a snowman with Mommy. 5. I want to celebrate Xiao Yichen's birthday with him. 6. I want to go to the amusement park with Mommy and Daddy. Gradually, Yun Shirshir's nose began to ache for some reason. The list of wishes in Yu Yu's notebook was extremely simple, but almost every wish had something to do with her. At the same time, she felt an inexplicable sense of unease in her heart. This wish list actually made her feel a little heavy-hearted. It was as if you would leave her if she fulfilled all the wishes on the list. She didn't know why she had such a thought. However, in the face of such an abnormal Yu, she became very sensitive. In the past, Yu would never take the initiative to stick to her. It was a feeling of having nothing to fear. It was as if a person's life was so long that there would always be many opportunities to accomplish many things. However, this wish list made Yun Shirshir feel like Yu was saying goodbye to her. It was as though he didn't have much time left with her. Therefore, he wanted to use the limited time he had to fulfill all his unfulfilled wishes and leave with no regrets. She didn't know why she had such a feeling. However, when she saw at the end of the wish list, "Take a family photo," her heart skipped a beat. She felt an inexplicable heartache. Why do you have this wish list?" Yun Shirshir asked tentatively. "There are so many wishes. There's still a lot of time in the future. You don't have to rush to fulfill them now, right?" Actually, they couldn't be considered wishes, because this was something that she could easily do. For example, go to the amusement park, celebrate his birthday, or make a cake for him. For example, take a family photo. Chapter 4005. Yu buried his little face in her embrace as he mumbled this under his breath. "I want it. I want it." Yu raised his head. His domineering tone was no different from Muyaja's. Yun Shirshir was a little helpless, but she let him do as he pleased. "Okay, then, when your daddy rests tomorrow, we'll take a family photo, okay?" "Okay." At night, when Muyaja returned home, Yun Shirshir asked him to take 3 days off. Mu Yaja was a little surprised. What's the matter? Here. Yun Shirshir smiled and handed him a notebook. This is Yu Yu's wish list. Take a look. Mu Yaja took the notebook and glanced at it, a little surprised. Wish list? Why did he make this list? I don't know. This guy has been a little strange since he came back yesterday, but no matter how I asked, he wouldn't tell me. He only said these wishes and wants me to fulfill them. Mu Yaja was a little stunned. He also felt that Yu was a little strange, but looking at these wishes, he could actually fulfill them easily. He didn't say anything and just nodded. I'll take tomorrow off. You're asking for 3 days? Yu said that he wants to go to the amusement park and celebrate Xiao Yichen's birthday. You can't be absent. Mu Yaja smiled and said indulgently, Okay, I know. What else could be more important than his wife and son? Hence, the next day, Mu Yaja called Lu Jinyu and said that he wanted to take 3 days off. Although Mu Yaja was the chairman and CEO of Xingyu Financial Group in the company, even if he was the one who set the rules, he himself was very strict with the rules. Just like the other employees, he would clock in and out and would never be absent from work, let alone be late and leave early. Originally, Mu Yaja had 7 days of annual leave to make up for. Lu Jinyu said that he got it, and for these few days, he would be in charge of everything. Yun Shirshir had already contacted the photographer the night before, and she had also informed Gong Jie and Hua Jin. The photographer arrived very early and did makeup for Yun Shirshir and Lisa. Hua Jin was the last to arrive. When he heard about this, he specially took leave from the production team to rush over. Now everyone was here. Yu was very satisfied. Because of his wish, so many people had cooperated with him. This made him feel incomparably warm. Yun Shirshir had only put on light makeup, while Lisa had only tied up her hair. She looked refreshed and did not put on any extra makeup. The background was sitting in the garden. The camera and light board were set up, and there was a bench in front of the flower bed. The men were standing, and the women were sitting. Naturally, Yueyao was about to enter the scene as well. Yun Shirshir meticulously dressed her up. She put on a red blouse and a furry hat for her. However, the little princess was still drinking yogurt and was about to start filming when Gong Jie carried her away. Now, he was too big of a movement, and the yogurt spilled on the ground. When the little princess saw this, her heart ached. As a little foodie, when she saw the yogurt spilled, she immediately lost her temper. She was so angry that she kicked Gong Jie, leaving footprints all over him. Gong Jie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't do it on purpose. He immediately bent down to kiss her. Wah! Yueyao's face was full of disdain. She was so angry that she slapped his face. Chapter 4006. Gong Jie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't do it on purpose and immediately bent down to kiss her. Yueyao was so angry that she slapped his face. She slapped Gong Jie's face with her little paws. The group of people laughed and rushed forward to coax the little princess in a hurry. They fought to take the little princess into their arms. Even though Gong Jie was covered in black shoe prints from Yueyao's kicks, he could not bear to give the little princess to anyone else. This was especially so when Hua Jin came to pick her up. He rolled his eyes at him fiercely. Yu stood at the side and watched quietly. In the past, he was not used to such a noisy scene. He liked quiet, but after returning to the Mu family, not only did he get used to it, but he also integrated into such an environment. She felt that the family was only warm enough when they were quarreling. However, all of this didn't belong to him. Yu said softly in his heart, "Give me a few more days. Give me a few more days, and I'll return everything that belongs to you." Yun Shirshir took Yueao from Gong Jie's arms. After the little princess was coaxed, she stopped crying and stopped making a fuss. She quietly lay on Yun Shirshir's shoulder. Her dark eyes were still filled with tears, and her eyelashes were wet. It made her look pitiful. Yu walked over and stood beside Yun Shirshir. He looked up at Yueao and suddenly smiled and opened his arms. "Brother, hug." Yueao blinked. At first, she was reluctant and shrunk her neck. Yu smiled and reached out his fingers to gently pinch her cheeks and ruffle her hair. It turned out that there was a telepathic connection between siblings. Yueao and Yu looked at each other for a long time. Suddenly, she stretched out her hands and opened her pink lips. "Big brother, carry me." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she realized that Yu was standing behind her and had been staring at Yueao for a long time. She squatted down, and Yu walked up to Yueao and hugged her. Soon, Gong Jie also changed his clothes and went downstairs. Yun Shirshir and Muyaja sat down. Yu hugged Yueao and sat next to Yun Shirshir. Basically, family photos were taken every year. But last year, because Muyaja was too busy with work and Yun Shirshir took on a drama in the middle of the year, the two of them basically missed each other's free time, so they didn't have much free time. This time, it was just the right time to make up for it. The photos were taken on the spot and could be obtained immediately. One of them was enlarged, and the other was of normal size. They were placed in Yu's wish list. The so-called wish list was really simple and pure. For example, Yu wanted to celebrate Xiao Yichen's birthday with him. At the birthday party, he wanted to eat a cake personally made by Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir was worried about this. Although she would occasionally cook and bake, she would only stick to small cakes. She still felt a little guilty about making a proper birthday cake. Hence, the night before the birthday party, at 1 o'clock in the morning, she was still in the kitchen making the cake base. She had failed a few times before. It was either too hard or not fully cooked. It was because the proportions were not right. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the fresh cake base was finally out of the oven. Yun Shirshir also made fresh cream, strawberries, and jam. Chapter 4007. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the fresh cake was finally ready. Yun Shirshir whipped fresh cream, strawberries, and jam. In the middle of the night, Yu woke up and vaguely heard movement from the kitchen. He walked to the kitchen door in confusion, only to see Yun Shirshir using the back of a knife to smooth out the cream on the cake. He couldn't help but be mesmerized. Yun Shirshir was also immersed in making the cake, so she didn't notice the person standing at the door. Yu couldn't bear to disturb her, so he just watched as she smoothed out the cream, whipped the flowers, and embedded the slices of strawberries into the cake. He was about to go back to his room when he heard a surprised voice behind him. "Yu." He turned around in surprise, only to see Yun Shirshir turn around and look in his direction. Knowing that she had been discovered, she stuck out her tongue in annoyance. "It's so late. Aren't you going to sleep?" Yu said, "I'm going to pee." "Have you peed?" Yu said, "I forgot." Yun Shirshir was speechless. She couldn't help but laugh. Pinching his face, she said, "Hurry up and go pee. I want Mommy to kiss me. Kiss me after you pee. Kiss me before I pee." Little Munchkin insisted and moved his face closer. She had no choice but to give him a peck on his rosy cheeks. Little Munchkin hurriedly moved the other side of his face closer. Full of anticipation, he hummed, "Here." Okay, it has to be symmetrical, right? Yun Shirshir kissed him on the other cheek. Yu also kissed her and turned to walk to the bathroom. Yun Shirshir tilted her head and watched his back. She didn't know why, but Yu had been very intimate with her these few days. In the past, if she missed a goodnight kiss, he wouldn't deliberately go to her room to ask for one. Recently, Yu was indeed a little abnormal. However, this means that he has become more cheerful. Yun Shirshir comforted herself. She carefully placed the cake into the freezer and went back to her room to rest. The next day, there weren't many people at the birthday party. Gong Jie did not come, and Hua Jin was filming on set. It was a simple birthday party, and there were only 6 of them. But this was Yu Yu's request. Since it was just a birthday party, he didn't want to make it a big deal. He wanted to make up for it because he hadn't had a birthday party with Xiaoi Chen yet. They were twins born on the same day, but they didn't have the chance to celebrate their birthdays together. So they wanted to make up for it. When Yun Shirshir pushed out the birthday cake that she had stayed up all night to make, Xiaoi Chen was pleasantly surprised. Yun Shirshir explained, Yu Yu said that he wanted to eat the birthday cake I made. But come to think of it, this is the most successful cake I've ever made. If Yu Yu didn't want to eat it, I probably wouldn't have tried to make it myself. Xiao Yichen said with envy and jealousy, It's all thanks to Yu Yu. Otherwise, I don't know when I'll be able to taste Mommy's birthday cake. Mu Yaja also said seriously, In the family, only Yu Yu and Yueyao have this privilege. The tone of their conversation is really sour. Yu Yu muttered, They're jealous. Chapter 4008. All right, let's cut the cake. Yun Shirshir passed the knife to Yu Yu and let Xiao Yichen hold Yu Yu's hand. Be careful. Okay, she reminded him. Yu Yu held the knife while Xiao Yichen held his hand. They evenly divided the cake into 2 halves and then into 6 equal pieces. Yu Yu took the first bite. The sweet and creamy taste complemented the refreshing taste of the strawberries. It tasted delicious and was comparable to the cake made by a cake shop. Although it did not have the skills of a top-notch cake maker, the fact that it was personally made by Yun Shirshir gave the birthday cake a special meaning. At night, Yu Yu held onto his wish list and removed one of the items. Seeing that all his wishes were gradually being fulfilled and that only the amusement park item was left, he felt a sense of loss. In his dream, he woke up and realized that he was lying on the sea. Wave after wave hit his body, but he did not feel any pain. Yu Yu stood up and saw that there was a black cage not far from the sea. A child in a white shirt was quietly curled up in the corner of the cage. He did not move at all. From afar, he looked like he was dead. He slowly stood up and walked toward the cage. When he stopped beside the cage, he raised his head and looked at the child curled up in the cage. He could not help but reach out to touch him. However, just as his fingertips were about to touch the child's exposed and empty arm, he retracted his hand. Yu Yu pursed his lips and grabbed the edge of the cage expressionlessly. He exerted a little force, and the cage instantly collapsed into ruins. This cage was the cage that imprisoned his first personality in his subconscious space. He was the only one who had the ability to open the cage. Now, he had broken the cage. In the ruins, the child in the white shirt gradually opened his eyes. He looked like he had been in a deep sleep for a long time. The blood in his body was frozen, and he did not stand up for a long time. He was cold. He had been asleep for too long. Because his second personality had been suppressed, he had been imprisoned for a long time. After sleeping for so long, her consciousness would gradually weaken. Even though she would never disappear, she would never be able to replace her second personality. Yu Yu looked at the child in the cage and said calmly, Are you awake? The child in the cage opened his eyes. When he saw Yu Yu standing in front of him, he narrowed his eyes in shock. It's you? It's me. Yu Yu coldly raised his eyes to meet his father's slightly dazed eyes. I tried my best. But he took a deep breath. In the end, I can't replace you. In the endless black sea, the two Yu Yu stared at each other. In this quiet space of consciousness, they met again. It was like a confrontation between an angel and a demon king. Why are you here? Yu Yu, who was wearing a white shirt, sat up in the cage. His gaze toward him was inexplicably wary. What do you want? Yu curled his lips coldly and suddenly leaned over. He placed his arms on the side of his shoulders and looked down at him, examining him without restraint. The white shirt, Yu was a little surprised by his actions. He froze and looked at him blankly. What do you want? Chapter 4009. He had been in a deep sleep for too long. Being trapped in such a space of consciousness and losing his own consciousness was no different from being dead. But now, his second personality had awakened. You stared at his face. Don't you think it's unfair? Why is it that you are the first personality and I am the second personality that was born? You're the one who gave birth to me. Now, I'm the one who's not needed. Why? Yu's handsome brows gradually formed a layer of hostility, like a dark cloud hanging over his head. It's not fair. Yu, who was dressed in a white shirt, smiled lightly and said nonchalantly, "There's no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. In the past, I've always thought that I'm the real first personality. So, I used all means to replace you. If the two personalities were labeled by color, one was white and the other was black. That time, Alice hypnotized you. The second personality took over, and the black version of him awakened from his ideology. He had always thought that he was the real first personality and that he had the absolute control. So, he wanted to destroy the other personality and return to the dominant position. But that time, he realized he couldn't destroy the other Yu. He didn't know why, and he didn't know that the personality that couldn't be destroyed was the first personality. He still thought that he was the first personality and that this body originally belonged to him. He should take it back, until he heard the conversation between Gong Shaoying and Yun Shirshir. He realized that the first personality could never be destroyed. It would only be sealed. Then, he confirmed that this body didn't belong to him. The Mu family wasn't his home either. Yun Shirshir, Mu Yaja, Yueyao, Hua Jin, these people who had given him warmth didn't belong to him. They belonged to Yu. The reason why he received this warmth was because they treated him as Yu as a substitute. He was an unwanted substitute. Then he chose to give up. Otherwise, Mommy would be very sad. She wanted the old Yu to come back to her, so he might as well fulfill her wish. He was willing to give up everything just to let the real Yu return to Yun Shirshir's side. He didn't deserve happiness. That was because he was born from darkness to begin with. Even if his heart was closer to sunlight, the child of darkness was not qualified to receive sunlight. Yu smiled and abruptly clasped his brother's shoulder, swapping their positions. At that time, Yu had already been swapped. What are you doing? Yu, who was wearing a black shirt, slowly closed his eyes. He gripped his brother's wrist tightly and led his hand to the handle. Then he clasped his brother's hand and strangled his own throat. Yu, who was in a white shirt, looked shocked. Don't you want to go back to Mommy? Yu smiled coldly and tightened his grip on his wrist. Kill me, then you can go back to her. Yu, who was in a white shirt, was stunned. The two of them were in a stalemate, maintaining this position. I'm only giving you one chance now. Chapter 4010. Before I regret it, Yu whispered into his ear. His low voice was even more depressing than the dark sea. Kill me. Why? Don't you want to kill me? He found it strange. If it were him, he would not hesitate to completely wipe out the second personality so that it would no longer threaten his position. Why was he hesitating? He even asked him, why? Yu's lips curved into a smile. His calm expression, coupled with his white shirt, was as bright and dazzling as the morning sun. If I wanted to kill you, I would have had the ability to do so back then. But I had no choice because I am different from you. I am the first personality. I will not die, but you will. You are another me, and I am another you. This life is made up of us equally, but I have been occupying this body for so many years. Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air as he held his aching forehead. I'm sorry. All these years, I've taken Mommy's love for granted. I've taken all their love for granted, leaving you with nothing but hatred and killing. When he was young, those dark memories eventually formed the second personality. At that time, the personality had just taken shape, and you wanted to suppress him. He did not know that he had dual personality, but in his subconscious, he could see the other personality clearly. Sometimes it was in his dreams. Sometimes it was in real life. He was worried that the second personality would gradually take over him and even hurt his family. He had never thought that the second personality was also a part of life, and that it also craved warmth. He had always defined this personality as evil and had been suppressing it, no matter how he resisted. You would not give him a chance to take over his body. Hence, all the happiness in the past 8 years had nothing to do with him. He had taken over all the good things and left the darkness and pain to him. The second personality, Yu, was born in pain and oppression. But from the beginning to the end, he lived in a world of oppression. He also wanted to experience what light was, what happiness was. Hence, when Alice hypnotized Yu, the first personality was hypnotized, and the second personality finally broke through the cage and sealed the first personality. But at that time, Yu did not resist. Instead, he chose to sleep. He wanted the second personality to be free, even if he could not return to Yun Shirshir. Yu's pupils constricted. The dark fog in his eyes became more intense. I also want you to experience what it is like to be family. So, I am willing to sleep. I just pass the warmth that belongs to you. Yu, who was wearing a white shirt, suddenly hugged him tightly as he furrowed his brows in guilt. Chapter 40:11. Yu said in a low voice, "We can coexist." Coexist? Yu scoffed, as if he had heard the funniest joke. We've coexisted for so many years, but we can't get along well at all. Instead of coexisting unfairly, it's better to destroy each other. I'm willing to share my warmth with you. You said seriously, I'm willing to share the love of Mommy, Daddy, brother, uncle, and all the family members. I don't want to. You was extremely stubborn. It's either I have it all to myself, or I can't have it. As he spoke, he held Yu's hand and pulled it to his neck again. Kill me. Give me freedom. As he said that, he curled his lips. I'm not needed at all. As soon as he said that, he couldn't hold back his tears anymore, and they fell from the corners of his eyes. She wants you, not me. Yun Shirshir hoped that the original Yu would return to her side. Since she hoped so fervently, he might as well fulfill her wish and return the original kind, cute, innocent Yu to her side. And he had always been used as a replacement. He was needed because of his existence. That was why Yu was still alive. Yun Shirshir had always been waiting for Yu to return to her side, but not for him. It wasn't that he didn't try. He tried hard to be like Yu, trying hard to force a smile, trying hard to bring them warmth. However, he couldn't do it. After all, they were two different personalities. He couldn't do it, and he couldn't replace him. Hence, he was willing to give up this position. Yu grabbed his wrist tightly and said in a low voice, Mommy needs you. Go back to her side, okay? His tone was inexplicably gentler. When he looked at Yu, his gaze was no longer as hateful as when he used to look at Yu. Yu had grown a lot in the past year. Yun Shirshir made him understand that in addition to hatred and darkness, there was also light and happiness in life. Life was very cruel. He recognized this cruelty, hated it, and viewed it with enmity. But Yu Yu was the only one who still loved life bravely after deeply understanding the cruelty of life. He was the real hero. He was the only one who had the right to take control of life. I'm not Yu Yu, I'm Gong Fan. Gong Fan smiled. The real Yu Yu is you. Kill me. He held his hand tightly, giving him strength. His dark and turbid eyes instantly became clear. Kill me, and I'll give you back your freedom. A strong gust. His snow-white shirt was slightly wrinkled from the wind. Yu Yu stared blankly at the child lying beneath him, calmly facing destruction. He gradually lost control of his hands, as if they were being controlled by his consciousness. His hands were strangling his neck and accumulating strength. Gradually, Gong Fan felt that the pressure on his throat was getting more and more suffocating. His face turned red, and then the color gradually faded. He frowned and said hoarsely, "I don't regret it," he murmured and closed his eyes. At that moment, Yun Shirshir's gentle smile and the scenes of them spending time together flashed past his eyes like a merry-go-round. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave. It was just that this reluctance was accompanied by a fatal suffocation, and that illusory consciousness gradually dissipated. Chapter 40:12. Xiao Chen was drenched in cold sweat as he sat up from the bed in shock. He had a dream. In his dream, he saw two Yu Yu. One was wearing a white shirt, and the other was wearing a black shirt. The Yu Yu in the black shirt was lying flat on the surface of the sea. He was holding on to the other, Yu Yu's wrist, and forcing him to kill him. Yu Yu, he turned around and looked at the other side of the bed. He didn't know when, but there was an empty space on the other side of the bed. Yu Yu, Xiao Yichen immediately got out of bed. He shuffled his slippers in a panic and opened the door. However, he didn't see Yu Yu. He felt inexplicably uneasy, and it wasn't just because of the dream. The telepathy between the twins made him realize that Yu Yu was in danger. Yu Yu, Xiao Yichen walked to the balcony. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, he saw a lonely figure sitting on a swing by the flower bed in the back garden. Yu Yu sat on the swing with his head lowered. The morning sun shone on his body, giving him a golden glow. Xiao Yichen heaved a sigh of relief. He opened the door and walked into the back garden. When he got close to Yu Yu, he slowly reached out and gently placed his hand on Yu Yu's shoulder. Yu Yu lowered his head. He didn't respond. Xiao Yichen couldn't help but feel a little worried. "You slept so late last night. Why are you up so early?" Xiao Yichen didn't mention his dream. He thought that Yu was too sensitive. It was just a nightmare. How could he make so many connections? Yu finally raised his head and opened his eyes. He looked at Yu with his clear eyes. His gaze was as clear as spring water, without a trace of impurity. He couldn't help but be stunned. His pupils contracted violently. "Brother!" Yu took a deep breath of fresh air and said calmly, "I'm back." Yu, Xiao Yichen was stunned. Although the Yu in front of him still had the same facial features, his aura was completely different. Yu, Xiao Yichen was so surprised that he cried tears of joy. "You're finally back." He was so emotional that he pounced on him and hugged him tightly. "I thought you would never come back." Yu, who was hugged by his older brother, was stunned for a long time before a helpless expression appeared on his face. This guy, Yu. However, it gave him a taste of warmth that he hadn't felt for a long time. Yu Yichen was hugged him. Yu, drip. Ace his tears. Tour. Yu couldn't help but laugh. Yu was so emotional that he started to cry. Was he that emotional to see Yu again? Yu ruffled Yu's hair. Yu did not realize that this action made Yu look like an older brother. Xiao Yichen hugged Yu tightly and said, "Since you're back, don't leave again." Yu laughed. "Do you wish that I didn't come back?" "No, I don't think so." I think that's what you're thinking. Xiao Chen's face turned red. No, you knew that Yu was joking, but he didn't want him to make such a joke. You rebuked him. He patted his head and snorted. Did you take good care of mommy and sister when I wasn't around? Chapter 40:13. Yu rebuked him. She patted his head and snorted. Did you take good care of mommy and little sister when I wasn't around? Of course. Whether you were around or not, I would take good care of mommy and Yueyao. Xiao Yichen suddenly thought of something, and his expression froze. He hesitated for a moment and asked tentatively, Yu, now that you're back, you won't leave us again, right? Yu shook her head calmly. I won't. Really? For some reason, Xiao Yichen didn't feel happy when he heard this reply. He looked around and hesitated. He wanted to say something, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Yu laughed and said, What do you want to ask? Just ask. You don't have to be so secretive. You're back. Then what about him? Xiao Yichen looked a little conflicted. Although he only used the word him, Yu knew who Xiao Yichen was referring to. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Do you want him to come back? If he comes back, are you going to leave us again? Yu didn't answer. Instead, there was a dead silence. It was like a silent choice question. Yu sat on the swing. She tapped her toes on the ground and swung gently. Xiao Yichen stood quietly at the side with a complicated expression. He didn't understand why he felt so lonely when Yu wasn't around anymore. It was as if his life had suddenly lost something, and his heart had become empty. Yu said calmly, Do you know about dissociative identity disorder? Yes, I know. Mommy mentioned it to me before. You've always had two personalities, right? One is you, and the other is Gong Fan. I have two personalities. For a long time, I was in a deep sleep. I thought that I would be in a deep sleep forever, but he woke me up. Yu's voice was as soft as a breeze. He said that whether it's mommy, daddy, Yueyao, or you, the one they need is me, not him. He wasn't needed, so he decided to leave. Leave. Xiao Yichen didn't understand the meaning of the word leave. Leave for a short while, or leave permanently? He would never come back. Once he left, he won't come back. Then Xiao Yichen felt especially bad. He looked at Yu and asked, Yu asked, Do you want him to stay? I hope both of you will stay. What if only one can stay? Little Yichen suddenly stopped talking. He lowered his head in desolation and sighed. I don't have the right to decide this. It was too cruel. No matter which personality Yu was, he was still his younger brother. One gave him warmth. The other made his heart ache. Actually, he didn't hate the other Yu, although he gave off a very cold feeling. When one peeled off his cold exterior, his heart was very gentle. If only one could stay, such a multiple-choice question was too cruel. However, as his uncle had said, if the two personalities couldn't merge into one, it would be the cruelest thing for Yu. If only one could stay, Xiao Yichen didn't want to make the cruel choice. Chapter 40:14. Yu did not answer him directly. Instead, he lowered his head and seemed to be thinking about something. Xiao Yichen immediately said, Don't misunderstand me. I just can't bear for him to leave. I don't mean anything else. Okay. Yu nodded silently and said honestly, I don't want him to leave either. When Xiao Yichen heard this, his heart ached. He walked to the swing at the side and slowly sat down. Holding the swing, he fell into a daze. After a long silence, Xiao Yichen asked hesitantly, What is that world like? What was the world that little Gong Fan was in like? After all, he was just an ordinary child. It was difficult for him to understand what the world of dual personality disorder was like. He felt very curious. When I was young, I felt that I wasn't the only one in this body. Yu was rare and precious. He had opened the door to Xiao Yichen's heart. It was also the most important door. In the past, he had never opened it to Xiao Yichen. Not to mention Xiao Yichen, he had never opened it to anyone. This was because he felt that he was an anomaly. He was an abnormal child. He did not want anyone to know that he was abnormal, especially Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen was too dazzling. From the day he was born, Xiao Yichen was destined to be better than him. At least, his healthy body made him envious. He did not have to stay in a place filled with disinfectant. He did not have to watch other people's children run and jump normally and play happily. He should be very happy, right? Xiao Yichen had the most sunny smile. When he smiled, his dimples were extremely cute. Most importantly, Xiao Yichen was very real. He was so real that he was transparent. At least when he smiled, he was really smiling because he was happy and not because he was forcing it. At the most innocent age of children, Yu already understood when to laugh and when to cry. Sometimes, even when he was in a bad mood, he had to force a smile, especially when he watched Yunna and Li Qin bully him. He felt so wronged, but in order not to let his mother worry, he forced a smile and said that it did not hurt, that he was not afraid, and that it was fine. He did not know when it started, but another Yu lived in his body. Yu had always thought that this Yu was an invader. Hence, he had been suppressing him. He had never been to his world because he had never known that Yu had another world. The feeling of having two personalities living in the same body was very strange. Our memories are interconnected. When he was in this body, I didn't know anything. And when I was in this body to be Yu, he didn't know anything. So, Yu uses lips suddenly too. Therefore, I only found out later that he threw Yunna and Li Qin into the sea. I don't know everything. I just have a vague feeling that it must have something to do with him. Xiao Yichen was stunned. He doesn't know what's wrong and what's right. He only knows that if he doesn't like something, he will kill it. If he likes something, he will protect it with all his heart. Yu's lips curved slightly, and he suddenly smiled. But there's one thing that's the same between us. He also loves Mommy deeply. Chapter 40:15. When I was 6 years old, I had my first interaction with him. Interaction? Yu nodded. It's not the kind of face-to-face interaction that you think it is. It's a very vague type of mental communication. What was it like? When I was asleep, I would dream of him and see the world that he was in. Actually, the world that he was in was the same as mine. He lived in the same house and had the exact same furnishings as my house. However, I don't know why, but it was always dark outside the window, and the clouds were dense. I never saw the sun in his world. Yu paused for a moment and suddenly became serious. From then on, I started to suspect that I had a second personality. I read some relevant information. Xiao Yichen furrowed his brows. I noticed that you were very different. In front of Mommy, you were always innocent and cute. However, in front of me, Daddy, and Li Hanlin, you were completely different. Was that also you? Yu closed his eyes and answered honestly, that wasn't me. Xiao Yichen suddenly muttered. Then, you were always cold in front of me. That wasn't you too? Sometimes it was me. Were you the one who said that to me? Sometimes it was me. Sometimes it wasn't. That means Xiao Yichen clutched his chest and suddenly felt a pang in his heart. Regardless of whether it was Yu's first personality or Yu's second personality, in any case, did they all despise him? His heart ached. You laughed and patted his head. Because when I met you, I couldn't control him anymore. In fact, I felt that he was a very talented personality. Why do you say that? In the business world, he was definitely a genius. Back then, those toy designs were indeed drawn by me. It was just purely out of interest. However, one time, he ran out and looked at my designs. Then, he handed them over to a company. Even I didn't know about this. I think he would have come out a long time ago, but I can't interfere with his memories, so I don't know his memories when he was in this body, so I thought he didn't come out. Little Yi Chen was stunned to hear that. In other words, he doesn't know what you did and what happened when you were in this body, right? Yes. Then you don't know what happened to him as this body. I don't know. However, maybe it's because of the main personality. If it's something that's particularly emotional, I'll know a little bit. Xiao Yichen furrowed his brows and reorganized his thoughts. I understand. He was the one who created the glory of Leji Holdings and came up with the Heavenly Eye plan, right? Yes. Yu nodded. Sometimes he and I would take turns, and we would swap places very quickly. Perhaps in the blink of an eye, we would have swapped places. Therefore, my memories are always different. What kind of difference? Yu recalled and said, I remember one time when I went to school to study. I clearly remember that I had just left the house in the morning, but when I opened my eyes, Mommy was already standing in front of me. When I looked at the sky, it was already evening. Chapter 40:16. Yu turned around and said seriously, in other words, he appeared after I left the house in the morning. When I returned to this body, it was already evening after school. The memory in between is no longer there, and my memory is still stuck in the morning. In the blink of an eye, it was already evening. As for what happened in between, I have no idea at all. Then I felt very tired and exhausted. I wanted to sleep. Sometimes when the personalities switched, my heart would be overloaded. I would feel very uncomfortable. Xiao Yichen suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Just imagining this scene was enough to make him feel terrified. Losing one's memory was the scariest thing. One of the reasons why humans were stronger than other animals was because of their memory. Whether it was studying or working, memory was an indispensable part. For example, as loyal as a dog, even if its owner mistreated it, it would mostly forget this memory. However, humans would not. They would always remember it. It would be engraved in their bones. Once they lost their memory, they would not be able to do anything. Moreover, it would be especially painful. When the personalities switched and the memories were not connected, life would become fragmented and especially painful. It was no wonder that Alice said that Yu's body could not bear the burden of two personalities. This was because the alternation of two personalities was an extremely painful thing in itself. Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air and said faintly, when I found out that this memory partition was caused by the alternation of his and my personalities, I could no longer suppress that situation. In fact, if I could have gotten treatment at that time, perhaps it would not have been so serious. Perhaps it was because I kept suppressing him. So, he held his forehead with a headache. He seemed to be very rebellious. The more I tried to control him, the more rebellious and unreasonable he became. He wanted to control me instead. He even thought that he was the first personality. Xiao Yichen said, in fact, I used to think that you were very scary, because you were like a little angel in front of Mommy, but in front of me, you were so cold, unfamiliar, and sharp-tongued. However, if I think about it carefully, you were not you at that time. You were just another Yu who ran out. However, he did not hurt anyone, be it Li Qin or Yana. If I were in their shoes, I would deal with them too. It's just that perhaps his way of doing things is rather extreme, but that doesn't mean that he is evil. Yu nodded and said honestly, yes, I'm relieved now. I don't think he is evil anymore. Xiao Yichen suddenly asked, Yu, do you believe in telepathy between Geminis? Yu was a little surprised to hear this. You seem to have mentioned this to me before. Yes, before I met you, I didn't know of your existence, but I would often dream of you. In the dream, I took your point of view. I felt that it was a little unbelievable, but those scenes were too real, so real that it was unbelievable. In this world, there are many things that can't be explained clearly by science as we know it. Xiao Yichen smiled as well. Chapter 40:17. Yes, I've mentioned to Daddy that I've always dreamed of you, but he didn't really believe me. At that time, he didn't know that you were still alive. It was only later that Daddy told me that you were weak when we were born. When the assistant arrived, you were already not breathing. They only took me away, but they didn't expect you to still be alive. Yu only lowered his head and didn't say anything. Xiao Yichen suddenly asked worriedly, "Then has he really left?" Yu did not say a word. Instead, he sucked in a deep breath of cold air and looked up at his father. His clear and limpid eyes gradually became clouded with gloominess. They kept churning, looking demonic yet frightening. He didn't say anything. Just by sitting on the swing, he emitted an aura that made Xiao Yichen feel inexplicably apprehensive. It's him. Yu didn't say anything, but his invisible aura made Xiao Yichen realize that the person in front of him wasn't the angel Yu, but the little devil Gong Fan. "You seem to want me to leave." Gong Fan spoke. His tone made Xiao Yichen even more certain that Gong Fan hadn't left. Xiao Yichen was pleasantly surprised. He didn't know how to hide it, so this surprise jumped out from his eyes. "You're still here, Gong Fan. You didn't leave." He was so excited that he hugged Gong Fan tightly. "I really thought you left. You didn't leave." "That's great." Gong Fan was so shocked that his eyes widened. He didn't expect Xiao Yichen to be so excited when he saw that he was still in this body. He could even imagine how lonely and disappointed Xiao Yichen would be when he saw that he hadn't left. But he didn't expect. Xiao Yichen hugged him tightly, but he felt a little awkward. He pushed him slightly, and his expression was unnatural and awkward. "What are you doing?" I'm just very happy." Xiao Yichen also realized that he had been too agitated. He immediately retracted his hand and adjusted his collar, feeling a little embarrassed. Gong Fan stared at him coldly, but his chest was inexplicably hot, as if he had been scalded by magma. "Happy?" He snorted. "What's there to be happy about? Don't you feel unhappy that I didn't leave and took over this body?" Xiao Yichen laughed. "Why would I? No matter if it's you or him, you're both my younger brothers. I like both of you, and I can't bear to let either of you go. You and him are the same." Gong Fan's eyelashes suddenly flickered, but he did not say anything. He turned his face away and heard Xiao Yichen say in surprise, "But it was you just now. Why is it suddenly you?" "He's tired." At the mention of you, Gong Fan's eyes softened and were no longer filled with hostility. "Tired?" "Yes," Gong Fan said calmly. "He has been sleeping for too long and hasn't gotten used to this body yet, so he did not know how to explain this process." Xiao Yichen seemed to have sorted out his thoughts. Could it be that the two personalities, Yu and Gong Fan, had reached some kind of tacit understanding? Every personality needed to rest. Then, when this personality was resting, the other personality would come out and take over this body as Yun Tianyu. When Yu rested, Gong Fan would come out. When Gong Fan was tired, Yu would return to this body. Chapter 40:18. If Yu rested, then Gong Fan would come out. If Gong Fan was tired, then Yu would return to this body. That should be the way to interpret it. Xiao Yichen did not probe further. It seemed that Gong Fan was in a bad state. He leaned against the swing, lowered his head, and said to Xiao Yichen, "Let me be alone for a while." Although Xiao Yichen was a little worried, he knew that since Yu had appeared, It seemed that the two personalities had reached a consensus. That was good too. Since he had woken up from a nightmare, he was a little sleepy, so he went back to his room to rest. When he woke up in the afternoon, he changed into his home clothes and went to the living room. However, he saw Yun Shirshir standing in the living room in a daze, staring at the tightly shut door of the dining room. She was also in a daze. At the same time, there was a strange expression on her face. Her eyes flickered as if some emotions were brewing. Xiao Chen walked to her side and gently tugged at her sleeve. He asked softly, "Mommy, what's wrong?" Yun Shirshir finally reacted. She lowered her head and looked at Xiao Chen. After a while, she regained her senses. "Who's in the kitchen?" I don't know either." Little Li Chen thought about it for a while, and then asked tentatively, "Don't tell me, it's you. Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows, her eyes throbbing a little more. Why is he in the kitchen?" In fact, Yun Shirshir knew very well that Gong Fan's personality. Yu knew nothing about cooking. He did not even know how to peel potatoes, let alone how to cook. However, there was indeed someone in the kitchen. If it was Yu, then it meant that he was back. However, when Yun Shirshir realized that Yu was in the kitchen, she had already been in a daze for more than 10 minutes. She knew that Yu was in there, but she did not dare to confirm it. What if she was a nanny? Sometimes Mu Yaja would order the nanny to cook for them, but it was not every day. She was worried that the housekeeper would be the one cooking and not Yu. That kind of disappointment was something she didn't dare to bear. She couldn't bear it. Xiao Chen walked to the kitchen door and pushed it open. As expected, Yu was standing in front of the oven with gloves on. She carefully took out the handcuffed Orlan's wings. At that time, Yu had grown a lot taller and no longer needed to step on a small stool to cook. Yu put the tray aside and looked in the direction of the door. When she saw Xiao Chen, she smiled gently and said, "You're finally up?" Yu, just as Xiao Chen said those two words, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Yun Shirshir felt her mind go blank. She walked to the door and saw Yu standing in front of the oven with gloves on. At that moment, tears welled up in her eyes. When Yu saw Yun Shirshir, he calmly took off his gloves and turned around. His face was full of tenderness. "Mommy, it's time to eat." "Mommy," his tone alone made her feel a sense of warmth that she had not felt in a long time. It was him. It must be him. He, that little angel, the first ray of sunshine in her life, had finally returned to her side. Yun Shirshir pounced on Yu and pulled him into her embrace, hugging him tightly. Chapter 40:19. "It's you." She widened her eyes, wanting to see the child in front of her more clearly. She hurriedly wiped the corners of her eyes and forced her tears back. However, she couldn't swallow the sobs in her voice. She hugged Yu so tightly as if she was afraid that the next second he would turn into a wisp of smoke and disappear from her sight. When Yu heard this, he sighed helplessly and gently stroked her silky hair. "Mommy is still such a crybaby." Yu, is it really you?" Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and held back her sobs. "Mommy isn't dreaming, right?" Yu looked at her lovingly. "Mommy, if you're still not awake, you can go back to bed and continue lying down. I'll wake you up when dinner is ready." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she couldn't stop crying. Based on this sentence alone, she was almost certain that the child in her arms wasn't Gong Fan. But only Yu would speak to her in such a doting tone. Yun Shirshir was inexplicably touched. She hugged Yu tightly and was momentarily speechless. This was because when she opened her mouth, only broken sounds came out. She seemed to have experienced this feeling once before. She recalled that when she was young, one of Yun Na's younger sisters came to visit and took away her favorite doll without her permission. When she came back from school, she couldn't find the doll, no matter how hard she tried. She thought that she had accidentally lost the doll until the little girl came to visit again. She watched as the child held the doll in her arms. Then, she realized that she hadn't accidentally lost the doll, but that the child had snatched it away. She didn't say anything at the scene. She waited until the child left before she was so upset that she started crying. Li Qin scolded her in front of Yun Na. After that, she found out that the little girl originally wanted Yun Na's doll. Naturally, Yun Na couldn't bear to part with it, so she stuffed the doll into her arms. After that, Yun Shishir was sad for a long time. It was only later, on her birthday, that Yun Yeqing secretly hid a gift box under her bed. That night, when Yun Shishir was about to go to bed, she found a note in the diary. On the note, Yun Yeqing had written that the gift was under the bed. It was only when she pulled the box out from under the bed that she realized that her father had secretly bought a doll behind Li Qin's back. This doll was identical to the one she had bought back then. Yun Shishir burst into tears as she hugged the doll that she had regained. It wasn't sadness, nor was it happiness. Instead, it was an indescribable emotion. It would not be an exaggeration to say that all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. She felt the same way when she hugged Yu. Yu caressed Yun Shishir's face and gently wiped away her tears with her two small hands. However, her eyes turned red as well. "Mommy, I'm sorry for making you wait for so long." Just as he said this, his eyes turned even redder, but he was still smiling. It was just a smile, but his eyes narrowed slightly as tears welled up in them. Yun Shishir's tears could not stop flowing. No matter how hard he tried to wipe them away, they continued to flow like pearls from a broken necklace. Yun Shishir also wiped his tears for him. The mother-son pair wiped away their tears, crying and laughing at the same time. Xiao Chen stood at the side. He felt an indescribable envy, but he also felt gratified. Chapter 40:20. The mother and son wiped away their tears, crying and laughing at the same time. Xiao Chen stood by the side. He felt an indescribable sense of envy, but he also felt gratified. He was gratified because the mother and son were finally reunited. He was envious because no one could compare to the bond between his mother and Yu. Yu had always said that he relied on his mother. In fact, compared to him, Yun Shishir relied on him more. She was the one who brought him into this world, but he was the one who saved her. No matter what, he could not compare to Yu's position in Yun Shishir's heart. He knew very well that Yu meant a lot to his mother. Similarly, his mother meant a lot to Yu. However, he did not feel jealous. Xiao Chen did not disturb them. Instead, he quietly left the dining room and left the door ajar to give them more space. The most touching thing was a reunion after a long separation. Although the two of them could not say much, just hugging like this was more than 1,000 words. The door was left ajar. After Xiao Chen left, Yu finally spoke. "Mommy, don't cry. If you cry, I will feel sad." His heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Yun Shishir pouted and complained to him coquettishly, "Mommy thought that I would never see you again. All this time, Mommy has been trying to think of a way. They all said that you have dissociative identity disorder and that your first personality was killed. Mommy didn't believe it." As she spoke, she choked on her sobs and could not continue speaking. Yu's heart ached even more. Back then, when he had chosen to hibernate, he had hesitated. He could not let go of his mother. However, he knew that he could no longer control his second personality. He also felt tired. Hence, for a moment, he had a selfish thought. He chose to hibernate, to rest. He was tired. But now, he regretted that decision. No matter what, nothing was more important than his mother. "Mommy, I was wrong. Yu lowered his head like a child who had done something wrong. He was sad and disappointed. I've made you worry. Yun Sure just hugged him without saying anything. It wasn't that she didn't want to speak, but she couldn't. Ever since she found out that Yu's personality had been killed, she had not been able to sleep properly for a long time. She had never understood what dual personality disorder was. Was it an illness or something else? Therefore, she and Mu Yaja seriously flipped through the relevant information. Only then did she understand what dual personality disorder was. There were only about 1,000 cases of dual personality disorder in the world. Yu was one of them. Furthermore, other than dual personality disorder, there was also multiple personality disorder. Multiple personality disorder, as the name suggested, was to split into many different personalities. Other than the main personality, some of the personalities could be a young girl, some could be a knowledgeable professor, and some could be an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Between so many personalities, their memories were not interconnected. The personalities were independent and did not interfere with each other. There was even a record of 24 personalities. Yu only had 2 personalities, but generally speaking, dual personalities were independent of each other and didn't know of each other's existence. However, Yu vaguely knew. Yun Sure remembered that a professor had analyzed that perhaps Yu's sixth sense was especially sensitive. Before this, Yu's main personality had vaguely sensed the existence of another him. Chapter 4021. Yun Sure remembered a professor's analysis that perhaps Yu's sixth sense was especially sensitive. Before this, Yu's main personality had vaguely sensed the existence of another him. However, the second personality did not know about the existence of the first personality. However, after being hypnotized by Alice, he created an illusory world. In this illusory world, the 2 personalities finally met. At that time, the second personality finally knew about the existence of the first personality. At that time, Gong Fan's personality also understood that if he wanted to replace Yu, he had to become the main personality. However, he did not know that the first personality could not be killed. However, after Yu fell into a deep sleep, he, as Yu, replaced the main personality. Therefore, when he faced Yun Sure, especially when he accidentally discovered Yun Sure holding Yu's photos in a daze, he felt a little sorry for her. He felt as if he had done something unforgivable. It was as if he had destroyed something beautiful and pure. For such a long time, he carried an indelible sense of guilt. As his feelings for Yun Sure grew closer, this sense of guilt tortured him constantly. However, Yun Sure did not resent Gong Fan at all. She deeply understood that whether it was Yu or Gong Fan, they were part of this life. Gong Fan's sins were not unforgivable. In the past, even if he was not the main personality, he had silently protected Yun Sure. After being hypnotized by Alice, although he had lost all his previous memories, his feelings for Yun Sure had formed an inseparable bond. Yun Sure did not favor anyone. However, at that time, she felt that Yu, whose smile was as beautiful as crystal, would probably never return to her side. That was why she felt uncontrollably sad. Now that she had regained what she had lost, how could she not be agitated? In her agitation, she only knew how to cry. Yu looked at Yun Sure, who kept crying, and felt sad. "Mommy, didn't I come back? Don't cry, okay?" Yun Sure nodded her head, but her tears continued to roll down her cheeks. The more Yu looked at her, the more heartbroken he felt. He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, "It's okay now. Just cry. What's wrong with crying?" Yu gently wiped away her tears and sighed again. "But if you cry too much, your eyes will definitely be swollen. It won't look good." When Yun Sure heard this, She could not help but laugh through her tears. Do you still care about your looks? Yun Shirshir sobbed as she put her arms around Yu's neck. My Yu is back. How can I care about my swollen eyes? She asked again. Will you suddenly disappear again one day? When Yu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. I will never disappear. Really? Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, was somewhat skeptical. Of course, she had heard Gong Xiaoying mention before that the dominant personality would never disappear. However, she was still a little nervous. She was worried that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, or even the day after that, Yu would suddenly disappear and be replaced by Gong Fan. Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Don't worry, Mommy. I won't leave you again. I definitely won't. Don't worry, okay? Chapter 4022. Yun Shirshir nodded and suddenly thought of something. Her eyes narrowed, and she asked tentatively, Well, what about him? Previously, Alice said that your personality was killed. I always thought. Yun Shirshir calmed herself down and said sadly, I thought you would never come back, so... Is not dead. He is still here, but I don't know when he will come back. Yu continued, but Mommy will definitely see him again. Yun Shirshir was relieved to hear this, but she was worried about something else. You two coexist? Yes, but your body won't be able to hold on, right? Yu did not answer this question directly, because even he did not know how long the two personalities could last. Mommy, you don't have to worry about this. Even if you do, you can't do anything. Yun Shirshir did not say anything else. Shinyu Financial Group. In the president's office, Mu Yaja was looking at his laptop, but his eyes were in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. He didn't know why, but since yesterday, his heart had been inexplicably uneasy. His cell phone suddenly rang. He picked it up and saw that it was Yun Shirshir. He was a little surprised. If there were no special circumstances, Yun Shirshir would not call him when he was working. Either she had encountered something troublesome, or he did not dare to think too much and asked nervously, What's wrong, Shirshir? Are you coming back for lunch? What's wrong? What's the matter? Under normal circumstances, he would eat at the company, but she suddenly asked him if he was coming home for lunch. He became more and more suspicious that something had happened. Nothing much. If you are free, come back for lunch with me at noon. How about it? Yaja raised his eyebrows. Hearing her brisk tone, his heart calmed down. Okay, Madam invited me. How can I not reply? Humph. Did you peek at my script? Why are you speaking like an ancient person? Mu Yaja gently curled the corner of his lips and said indifferently, Ever since you accepted this role, you've been holding on to the script. Of course, your husband wants to see what kind of script has you so captivated. I knew it. Yun Shirshir pouted and immediately said, All right, I won't joke around anymore. Come back soon. Yu has prepared a surprise for you. Yu? Shoo, you can't reveal confidential information. Yun Shirshir was probably worried that she would reveal too much, so she quickly hung up the phone. Muyaja put his phone away and closed his laptop. He immediately stood up and walked to the door, where he bumped into Lu Jinyu. Lu Jinyu was looking for him. Boss, what are we eating for lunch today? Muyaja glanced at him. You can eat it yourself. Lu Jinyu sized him up suspiciously. Why? Aren't you coming with me? No. Did you make an appointment with someone? Lu Jinyu even pretended to sniff. Hey, who did our boss make an appointment with for lunch? There's something fishy going on. I have to report it to sister-in-law. Sure. I'll go home for lunch. You can report it to her. Lu Jinyu loved to snitch. Usually, he would tell Yun Shirshir where he went and who he was socializing with. What? Go home for lunch? This was unprecedented. Chapter 4023. When Lu Jinyu heard this, he laughed wickedly. Sister-in-law specially prepared lunch. I want one too. I'll go back with you. Freeload. Let's meet face to face. What? Lu Jinyu muttered. You don't have the spirit to share at all. If you say anything more, you'll lose your annual leave. I wouldn't dare. Lu Jinyu immediately stood respectfully and hurriedly said, Chief, let's go home and eat. Be careful on the road. With a wave of his handkerchief, Mu Yaja floated away. He drove home and parked the car in the garage. When he opened the door, he smelled a fragrant aroma. New Orleans roasted wings. His nose was sensitive, and he could even smell what was being cooked in the afternoon. Yun Shirshir was standing in the dining room, setting the table. When she saw that he had returned, she immediately went up to him and happily wrapped her arms around his waist. Her tone was as gentle as it could be. You're back. Her light tone sounded like she was in a good mood. Mu Yaja ruffled her hair and looked at her lovingly. You seem to be in a good mood today. Is there anything worth celebrating? Of course there is. Yun Shirshir hugged him and rubbed against his chest coquettishly. Then she turned around and said to the kitchen, You, is it done? It's done. Mu Yaja looked in the direction of the voice and saw you walking out with a soup pot. When he saw you wearing an apron, he was surprised for a moment. This was because Mu Yaja's personality was extremely bad at cooking. He also didn't know how to do housework. However, he had inherited Mu Yaja's outstanding talent in military and business matters. Usually, when Xingyu encountered any difficult cases, he would be able to give advice and suggestions. However, when it came to housework, he was completely clueless. Only Yu's personality was good at doing housework. Mu Yaja looked suspiciously at Yun Shirshir, and then at Yu. Yu carried the soup pot to the table, and then looked up at Mu Yaja with a gentle smile. Daddy, let's eat. Mu Yaja became even more bewildered. His eyes widened in disbelief. How can you cook? He then looked at Yun Shirshir, only to see that Yun Shirshir was deliberately keeping him in suspense, but she didn't say anything. When Yu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. Mommy, didn't you tell Daddy about this? No, you can tell him yourself. As she said this, Yun Shirshir sat down at the table and looked at the table full of dishes that Yu had prepared. She was drooling. Yu frowned helplessly and looked at Mu Yaja. She cleared her throat awkwardly and said proudly, What's the matter? Daddy doesn't seem to welcome me back. If Mu Yaja still didn't understand what was going on, then he wouldn't be Mu Yaja. It's you. Mu Yaja was extremely surprised. You're back. Yu nodded and said calmly, You don't welcome me back? Why are you acting so indifferent? Mu Yaja didn't know why, but his body stiffened. He couldn't believe it, and he was so agitated that his whole body started to tremble. Come here. He bent down slightly until they were eye level. Then he gently opened his arms and said, Come here. Yu pursed her lips and walked towards him. When she was in front of him, she put her hands behind her back bashfully, and her cheeks were strangely red. Chapter 40-24. Mu Yaja finally recognized him. The person standing in front of him wasn't Gong Fan, but Yu, that innocent, pure, adorable, and kind Yu, that considerate, and gentle Yu. Mu Yaja felt as if he was about to suffocate. He was choking and choking. Yu, he called out his name, but his voice was hoarse. Even though he hadn't seen him for so long, he didn't find him unfamiliar at all. It was as if the scene of you standing in front of him, was still yesterday. Daddy, he sucked in a breath of cold air, opened his bright eyes again, and opened his trembling arms. Mu Yaja saw that his fingertips were trembling nervously. His heart ached even more as he looked at him. He went forward slightly and hugged him tightly. "You're back." He sighed emotionally with a bitter expression. You was touched when he heard this. While he was unconscious, tears flowed out of his eyes uncontrollably. He could hear how much Muyaja missed him. It had been so long, more than a year. He had been in a deep sleep. Daddy must have been waiting for him to come back, just like Mommy. Xiao Yichen walked out of the corridor and happened to see this scene. He didn't know why, but he also felt extremely touched. He hid in a corner and secretly watched. After a while, he walked to Yun Shirshir's side and hugged her waist to watch this scene with her. The father and son didn't seem to be like the relationship between Yun Shirshir and Yu. They didn't talk much and didn't make much physical contact. They just hugged each other like this. However, for some reason, Yun Shirshir felt an inexplicable heartache for him. However, it also gave her a very warm feeling. This was the bond between Muyaja and Yu that couldn't be severed. In fact, it was different from Yun Shirshir. Muyaja was a man, and a man's emotional expression was not as rich as a woman's. Usually, he did not reveal his emotions and did not speak much. Sometimes, when Yun Shirshir missed Yu so much that she could not sleep well at night, Muyaja would comfort her and make it seem like it was an understatement. What was the truth? Muyaja's longing for Yu had never diminished. Hugging Yu, Muyaja let out a long sigh and said in a deep voice, "Yu, I miss you so much." These words made the boy's tears flow out of his eyes. He held back his tears, pursed his lips, and hugged his neck even tighter. "Daddy, I miss you too." Yu hugged him and said sadly and emotionally, "I miss you all the time." They had been looking forward to this moment of reunion for so long. Now that they were finally seeing each other again, Yu felt as if there was hot lava gathering in his chest and flowing against his blood to his head and limbs. When Yun Shirshir saw this scene, she felt as if her heart had been injected with countless things called warmth. She did not dare to disturb them, nor could she bear to disturb them. She just watched as they hugged each other. It was so quiet that even their breathing was very, very light. When Muyaja sat at the dining table with Yu in his arms and looked at the sumptuous spread on the table, he felt very emotional. "It seems like it's been a long time since I've eaten Yu's cooking." When he said this, Yu found it strange and asked, "He doesn't know how to cook?" They knew very well who Yu was referring to. Chapter 40:25. Little Yi Chen immediately replied, "No, I don't. He doesn't know how to cook or do any housework." He paused for a moment before he added, "But he is much smarter than Yu. Also, when Yu heard this, he lifted his eyes and looked at Xiao Yichen with a kind expression. With just one look, Xiao Yichen felt as though he had seen hell through his eyes. Xiao Yichen said, Yu is still the cutest." Yu finally stopped looking at him. He blinked his eyes gently and snorted. "At least you know what's good for you." Xiao Yichen laughed and immediately covered his face. However, he thought to himself, is this really not Gong Fan? Is this really the gentle and considerate Yu? Why does he suddenly have a kind expression that only Gong Fan has? It was so scary. When Yun Shirshir saw this, she couldn't help feeling a little cold. "Your expression just now was so scary." Xiao Yichen was so scared that he didn't even dare to eat his chicken wing. Xiao Yichen hugged his rice bowl and lowered his head to eat his rice. Muyaja was curious. "You don't know what kind of personality he has. You didn't seem to understand." Muyaja didn't know how to explain it. It was hard for him to put it into words. Yun Shirshir immediately explained on behalf of Muyaja, "What your daddy wants to ask is how he usually is and what he does. Don't you know?" Yu shook his head. "I don't know. I only know that he must be a very cold child. However, since he is very gentle with Mommy, I reserve the right to let him exist. When Xiao Chen heard this, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine. It turned out that Yu Yu was the final boss. Gong Fan was so scary and terrifying. However, the only thing that determined his existence was Yu Yu, who was smiling as innocently as a little white flower. He was the real Demon King hiding behind Gong Fan. I haven't cooked in a long time. I don't know if my culinary skills are still as good as before. Yu Yu asked Yun Shirshir, Mommy, does my cooking taste good? It's delicious. Don't you think it's delicious? Yu Yu licked his lips and said worriedly, my sense of taste seems to have lost its sensitivity. Oh, yesterday he ate too much bitter gourd, so his taste buds are a little off. Yu Yu was rather disgusted when he heard that. Why would he want to eat bitter gourd? Because he played a game with me and lost. Xiao Chen said proudly, the loser had to eat all the bitter gourd. Hence, he took all the bitter gourd. When he brushed his teeth at night, he said that he couldn't even taste the toothpaste. That's probably the reason. Yu Yu's eyes were filled with disdain. He didn't expect Gong Fan to have such a childish side. It was unimaginable. He had always thought that Gong Jie was the kind of child who was cold and serious and would never play with Xiao Chen. Mu Yaja commented, it's much better than before. Yun Shirshir said, it must be because you haven't tasted Yu Yu's cooking for too long. Who has been cooking for so long? Yu Yu suddenly asked. Yun Shirshir and Xiao Chen looked at each other and said awkwardly, the nanny. Yu Yu was speechless. He had thought that Mommy would cook for them herself. He didn't expect her to be so lazy.